You're really? Hall Master Yuan's eyes shone brilliantly right away and he laughed. Haha. Jian Wushuang, your luck is not too bad. My luck is not too bad. However, I have a question now. Jian Wushuang had an indifferent expression. I have heard that the requirements to enter the Thunderbolt Island are extremely high. Indeed, the minimum requirement to enter the Thunderbolt Island is to be an eternal real god. Hall Master Yuan nodded his head and laughed soon after. However, in terms of realm, you do not need to be an eternal real god. It will be fine as long as you have the fighting capabilities of an eternal real god. For example, there are some void real gods at the Thunderbolt Island as well. In particular, most of these void real gods are those who stand at the top, and they are geniuses who are extremely outstanding. However, the key point is that they are not eternal real gods. Since void real gods are able to enter, as long as the abilities of a universe god like you are able to achieve that level, you will naturally be able to enter the Thunderbolt Island. Is that so? Jian Wushuang's eyes brightened up. In actual fact, I had already made preparations for you to go to the Thunderbolt Island even if you didn't obtain this token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. I have filed an application to the higher-ups of the Sanctuary Alliance to get a token of the Fairy Palace's legacy for you by paying a price for it, Hall Master Yuan said. What? Both real god Wu Liang and real god Fei Yan looked over with surprise. In the history of the lineage of Star, you are the most outstanding genius disciple and you possesses an immeasurable amount of talent. As such, the lineage of Star will naturally do its best to nurture you. Moreover, it's only one token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. Although it's precious, it's nothing to the lineage of Star. Not only will I help you to get a token of the Fairy Palace's legacy now, but in 60,000 years, the new token of the Fairy Palace's legacy that is given out by the Sanctuary Alliance will also be given to you. However, the requirement for this is that you must have already made a breakthrough to a real god. Hall Master Yuan laughed. After hearing what was said, real god Wu Liang and real god Fei Yan were completely stunned. They then looked at Jian Wushuang at once and their eyes were filled with enviousness. It should be known that deacons of the lineage of Star like them wanted the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy so much that they even dreamt about it. However, no matter how hard they fought for it, they were unable to get such an opportunity. However, what about Jian Wushuang? When he was a universe god, he would be given a token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. After 60,000 years, he would be given a second one as long as he became a real god. He did not even need to fight with anyone. Moreover, even without needing him to request for the token, Hall Master Yuan would have also taken the initiative to make preparations for him. Such treatment, when comparing his treatment to others, it was really infuriating. Even Jian Wushuang himself was a bit dumbfounded. Hall Master Yuan, since you have already made a trip to exchange a token of the Fairy Palace's legacy with the higher-ups of the Sanctuary Alliance for me, then the token with me. Jian Wushuang did not finish speaking. Since you have obtained this token of the Fairy Palace's legacy yourself, it is naturally yours, Hall Master Yuan laughed. In other words, I can have 2 tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy when I am a universe god and 60,000 years later. I will be able to get a 3rd token if I make a breakthrough to a real god by then? That's right. Hall Master Yuan nodded his head. For the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy, 1 token will only allow you to choose 1 fairy palace to comprehend for 100 years. However, you have been comprehending the Reincarnation doctrine and Spacetime doctrine at the same time. Hence, if you have 2 tokens, you can comprehend 100 years each in the Reincarnation doctrine's fairy palace and in the Spacetime doctrine's fairy palace. That would be just nice for you. However, isn't this a bit? Jian Wushuang had a puzzled expression. A bit what? A bit too biased. Hall Master Yuan sneered. If anyone feels that way, tell him to try to fight an eternal real god on equal footing when he is still a universe god. If he is able to do it, I guarantee that I will give him the same treatment. Moreover, this matter is not decided by me alone. It is decided by me, the Palace Master and the 2 other Hall Masters after some discussion. Thus, who in the lineage of Star would dare to have something to say? After hearing what was said, real god Wu Liang and real god Fei Yan, who were by the side, looked at each other, and they forced a smile. They knew that, for this matter, Hall Master Yuan was not being biased. Instead, The talents that Jian Wushuang displayed were indeed worthy enough for the lineage of Star to pay such a big price to nurture him. Even if the news were to spread, the experts in the lineage of Star could at most be envious of Jian Wushuang, and they would not be dissatisfied in the slightest bit. After all, the lineage of Star was just like that. One would need to display abilities that were good enough to earn the lineage of Star's resources. We shall leave this matter as such. In no time, the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy will come. At that time, I will send people to bring you to the Thunderbolt Island, Hall Master Yuan said. Understood, Jian Wushuang said. Oh right. I heard from Wu Liang that you have already cultivated the second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace successfully? Hall Master Yuan looked toward Jian Wushuang abruptly. That's right. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. That's great. Hall Master Yuan had a beaming smile, and it was only after a long time that he calmed down. He then warned, remember this, Jian Wushuang. From now on, unless there is a need to, try to refrain from using the secret skill of Star Palace. This secret skill is a trump card, and if you were to use it properly, you would be able to turn the tide during a critical situation. Hence, you had better not let other people know about it. In addition, I will also tell Wu Liang and Fei Yan to keep this matter to themselves. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded his head again. That's it. You may leave now. Hall Master Yuan waved his hands. Jian Wushuang, Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan then went their own separate ways. After returning to the Sword Star, Jian Wushuang started to train again. At the same time, he was also waiting quietly for the second token of the Fairy Palace's legacy to arrive. He was looking forward to the Thunderbolt Island as well as the Fairy Palace on it. On the other hand, the news of him obtaining 2 tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy in one go, and the fact that he might even get a 3rd token in the future started to spread in the lineage of Star. After many experts in the lineage of Star knew about that, many of them gasped. However, no one was jealous. All of them knew that Jian Wushuang had obtained everything with his own abilities. If they had the same abilities as well, they would definitely have gotten the same treatment as Jian Wushuang. However, it was a pity that they did not have the same abilities. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed and the second token of the Fairy Palace's legacy finally arrived. Jian Wushuang, I will get Wu Liang to send you to the Thunderbolt Island. As for some of the matters regarding the Thunderbolt Island, Wu Liang will tell you about it clearly. In addition, after reaching there, remember to train properly and don't miss this opportunity at any cost, Hall Master Yuan warned. Jian Wushuang naturally agreed to it. After that, he went to the Thunderbolt Island together with Real God Wu Liang. Elder Wu Liang, I'm sorry for troubling you to bring me to the island. Jian Wushuang was standing in front of Real God Wu Liang. No problem. It just so happened that I was planning to go to the Thunderbolt Island as well. Therefore, sending you there is no trouble. Real God Wu Liang laughed. Elder Wu Liang is planning to go to the Thunderbolt Island as well? For training? Jian Wushuang asked randomly. Yes, Real God Wu Liang nodded his head. The Thunderbolt Island does not only contain the Fairy Palace. It also contains other opportunities as well as special training grounds. Thunderbolt Island is Sanctuary Alliance's lair. There are many opportunities and cultivation places. To us, eternal real gods, these are all of great use. The experts from each force in the 10 sanctuaries would like to cultivate in Thunderbolt Island too. Similarly, it is restricted too. Sanctuary Alliance set a rule that eternal real gods under the control of the great forces get a chance to head to Thunderbolt Island for cultivation every 100 years, and the cultivation period can last for 3,000 years each time. Real God Wu Liang said. There's such a rule? Jian Wushuang was astonished. No choice. After all, forces in the 10 sanctuaries, including many solo experts, all the eternal real gods are members of Sanctuary Alliance. The total number of all eternal real gods is large while the resources on Thunderbolt Island is limited. Hence, there must be rules. Otherwise, all eternal real gods would stay on Thunderbolt Island all year round. The resources on Thunderbolt Island would have been exhausted long ago. Real God Wu Liang said. True. Jian Wushuang smiled and nodded in agreement. But his face suddenly changed. In other words, I can only stay on Thunderbolt Island for 3,000 years? Yes, that's why Hall Master Yuan told you to seize your chance. If you were to waste this opportunity, you would have to wait another 100,000 years to visit Thunderbolt Island again. Real God Wu Liang said. Of course, if you were to achieve one condition, you would receive the right to stay on Thunderbolt Island permanently. What condition? Jian Wushuang asked. Pass the 5th level of Doctrine Palace. Real God Wu Liang said. Jian Wushuang was shocked at first, then gave a bitter smile. The 5th level of Doctrine Palace? One should know that he only possessed the standard to pass the 2nd level of Doctrine Palace. He was still far away from the 3rd level, let alone the 5th level. Many chaotic real gods have yet to reach the 5th level of Doctrine Palace, right? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, normally a chaotic real god standard is to pass the 4th level of Doctrine Palace. As for the 5th level, only extremely strong chaotic real gods on the top would be able to pass through that level. Also, only they would get the right to stay on Thunderbolt Island forever. Real God Wu Liang said. Jian Wushuang understood too. Those who had passed through the 1st level would be the top void real gods. Those who passed through the 2nd level would be ordinary eternal real gods. The 3rd level would be considered the top eternal real gods. For instance, Real God Wu Liang, Real God Dan Ding, Real God Ming Xian were on this level. The 4th level would be the standard of an ordinary chaotic real god. The 5th level would be the top of chaotic real gods. Real God Long Qing, who went to Blood Demon Church to catch Lord Leng alive with Jian Wushuang back then, was barely at that level. The 6th level would be the standard of an expert on Real God ranking list. The 7th level, to enter the 7th level from the 6th level, there was a huge threshold. One who reached this level would have reached the standard of an almighty in terms of comprehension towards Heaven Way. Many almighties were on this level. Also, there were a few monsters listed in the top few on Real God ranking list who were also at this level. The 5th level of Doctrine Palace is too far away from me. Jian Wushuang smiled. Who's not? Real God Wu Liang shook his head too. There are many real gods in Lineage of Star, and there are some who are chaotic real gods. However, those who could stay on Thunderbolt Island all year round, including Lei Chao, there are only 8 of them. 8. Jian Wushuang was surprised. Even such a great force like Lineage of Star only had 6 people who had reached the criteria. The total number of experts from all forces in the 10 sanctuaries who reached the criteria was probably not many. Of course, that was if the Almighties were excluded. The Almighties definitely had the right to stay on Thunderbolt Island permanently. Jian Wushuang and Real God Wu Liang chatted casually as they hurried their journey. Very soon they arrived at Cloud Island. There were many wormholes on Cloud Island. Among the wormholes, there was one that connected directly to Thunderbolt Island. It was just that there were not many that activated it normally. With a wormhole, Jian Wushuang and Real God Wu Liang stepped foot on Thunderbolt Island very quickly. This is the lair of Sanctuary Alliance? Thunderbolt Island? Jian Wushuang looked around and there was a giant floating island. The island was extremely huge and boundless. On the island, there were tall mountains that could be seen faintly. There were also palaces and pavilions that were floating in the void. Jian Wushuang was at the border of the island while there was a faint green light lid behind him. The green light lid covered the entire island and there was green lightning flashing in the lid faintly as though it was going to swallow the world. The randomly flashing green lightning gave Jian Wushuang a chill after just one glance. He could tell that if a bolt of slight green lightning were to strike him, it would shatter him into pieces and he would be doomed forever. Just then, Jian Wushuang's expression suddenly changed. This is? Jian Wushuang looked at his palm. He gripped his fist. Then he creased his eyebrows. Why? Do you feel your divine power weakening? Real God Wu Liang looked at him. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. Although he was only a universe god, as an inverse cultivator, his explosion of divine power could be compared to the top void real god favorably. It was maybe even not much weaker than an eternal real god. However, he could clearly feel that his divine power was only at the level of an ordinary real god. It's very normal. Every expert who comes to Thunderbolt Island, including Almighties, have their divine power restricted. Real gods like us, regardless if we are void real gods, eternal real gods, or chaotic real gods, Our divine power would only maintain at the level of an ordinary void real God when we are here. As for Almighties, their divine power would maintain the level of an ordinary Almighty's level. Real God Wu Liang explained. I see. Jian Wushuang understood. As everyone's divine power was restricted, he naturally found it acceptable. Plus, to him it was good news. After all, his divine power should be bottom of the people on Thunderbolt Island. But then as their divine power was equal, when they fight against one another to learn from each other, they were only competing for their comprehension of Heaven Way and also unique skill and secret skill. The vast difference in terms of divine power wouldn't exist. Follow me. Real God Wu Liang brought Jian Wushuang to the middle of the island. As they plunged forward, he briefed Jian Wushuang about the fundamental of Thunderbolt Island. Jian Wushuang, listen up. On Thunderbolt Island, you must remember one thing. They prohibit fighting and killing without permission. After all, Sanctuary Alliance gathered countless sects within 10 cultivation sanctuaries, including many solo experts. Between these forces and experts, there were many that harbored hatred against one another. But regardless of your resentment, no one can launch an attack on Thunderbolt Island. If the hatred can't be resolved, there will be a fighting space designated for battle on Thunderbolt Island and also an life and death space. They can head over there to resolve it. Fighting space. This is where both people fight and see who is stronger. Life and death space. In here, you will regain your divine power completely and you can fight to the death. Apart from these two places, if you were to fight someone else in any other places, you would be punished immediately. Hence, no matter how deeply rooted your hatred is, you must absolutely remain calm. You must know that quite a number of Emperor-level super experts oversee the Thunderbolt Island. The moment you attack someone at any other places, they will suppress you immediately and not give you any chance. Real God Wu Liang said. Emperor-level. Jian Wushuang was shocked. He also knew that Emperor-level experts were at the level of Sanctuary Masters. For example, the Purple Moon Sanctuary Master was the Purple Moon Emperor. Back then, Jian Wushuang had obtained 2 white blaze fruit trees from Wu Bei's cave. As the 2 white blaze fruit trees were extremely valuable, even the Star Palace Master only dared to be in the possession of one of them. As for the other tree, it was given to the Purple Moon Emperor so that he would support the lineage of Star. With that, no one in the 10 sanctuaries dared to set their eyes on the white blaze fruit tree in the lineage of Star. This was how high the deterrence level of an Emperor-level super expert was. With quite a number of Emperor-level super experts overseeing Thunderbolt Island, no one in the 10 sanctuaries would dare to act presumptuously on Thunderbolt Island. Jian Wushuang. Look. Real God Wu Liang pointed toward a direction abruptly. That's? Jian Wushuang saw that there was a lofty mountain at the end of the direction. However, at the middle of the mountain, there was a large saber marking that was made using a saber. Not only could the saber marking destroy the universe, it was also extremely intimidating. What a frightening stroke! Jian Wushuang revealed a panicked expression. That is left behind by an almighty of the Sanctuary Alliance. Even though it's only a saber marking, it still made many real gods who are proficient in saber skills obsessed with it. Real God Wu Liang said. Jian Wushuang also saw that at the foot of the lofty mountain, there were 2 shadows sitting down with their legs crossed, and they were most likely comprehending the saber marking. A saber marking left behind by an almighty has actually been placed there randomly? Jian Wushuang was surprised. Haha, it's not only saber markings. Look over there. Real God Wu Liang pointed at another direction. Jian Wushuang looked in his direction and his pupils shrank at once. That was a floating statue of a purple, crawling exotic beast. Its consciousness and size were not too big, it was floating in the air, and it was also not too eye-catching. However, a total of 10 real gods were surrounding it, and they were comprehending the hidden secrets that the statue contained. What a peculiar statue! Although Jian Wushuang was looking at the statue from a long distance away, he nearly got absorbed by it. That statue contained the shocking myriad beasts doctrine. Now, look over there. Real God Wu Liang pointed toward another place. Jian Wushuang also saw many other peculiar places at the Thunderbolt Island. There were 3 holes that were created by 3 long spears. There were wonderful and unfathomable patterns. There were many different kinds of ancient characters. Every place was extremely profound, and there was quite a number of real gods studying them intensively. At the same time, Jian Wushuang also saw 3 shocking sword markings, and every marking had extremely similar qualities. Moreover, every marking caused Jian Wushuang to be stunned. Those 3 sword markings were left behind by the owner of the Sky Sword Mountain. Real God Wu Liang explained. No wonder. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. The owner of the Sky Sword Mountain was an almighty who was proficient in sword principles with great sword skills. Hence, the sword markings that he left behind were naturally not normal. The Thunderbolt Island is too incredible, Jian Wushuang exclaimed with admiration. During his walk, he saw tens of special places. Some of them were left behind by top chaotic real gods, while some of them were left behind by almighties. In short, if those peculiar places were placed in the outside world, they would definitely attract a great number of cultivators to comprehend them. However, in Thunderbolt Island, they could be seen everywhere. Thunderbolt Island is full of opportunities everywhere. Those that you have just seen were merely a small part of it. For the opportunities, you have to look for them slowly, and it is entirely by luck. If your luck is good, you will be able to find something that is helpful to you. However, if your luck is bad, you will be unable to find anything. For example, if I were to add the total amount of time that I have spent in the Thunderbolt Island, the time would amount to tens of thousands of years. During that period of time, I have found a few peculiar places that were suitable for me to comprehend in. However, I have never managed to come across a big opportunity, Real God Wu Liang said. A big opportunity? Jian Wushuang's expression changed. A big opportunity is where one is able to raise his abilities greatly in a short amount of time. Real God Wu Liang laughed. This kind of opportunity does not have a requirement. Be it left behind by a chaotic real god or an almighty, as long as it is very helpful to you such that it can raise your abilities greatly, it works as a big opportunity. I agree. Jian Wushuang nodded his head as well. Be it an opportunity or anything else, the best thing was for it to be suitable for oneself. Jian Wushuang, look over there. Real God Wu Liang pointed toward another place again. Jian Wushuang looked over immediately, and he saw a lofty palace that was floating in the air. The palace was extremely big, and it looked extremely imposing. That's the Doctrine Palace, Real God Wu Liang said. Jian Wushuang's body and mind became frozen. Doctrine Palace? In the eternal chaotic world, the comprehension of the power of Heaven Wei by cultivators were based off the standards of the Doctrine Palace by using it as a reference. Jian Wushuang had also heard of the Doctrine Palace a long time ago. However, he had never tried challenging it for real. It was only until the very moment that he finally saw the real Doctrine Palace. The Doctrine Palace has 9 levels. From here on, when you train in Thunderbolt Island, if you wish to check how much your abilities have grown, you can challenge the Doctrine Palace, Real God Wu Liang said. Look over there. That area was left behind by a few top experts. In particular, that area includes a cave that was left behind by some experts. The cave also contains opportunities. However, the requirement is that you must pass their test. There is a big wasteland in the middle of that huge mountain range which contains countless stone tablets. Records of a few unique skills are recorded on the stone tablets, and you can study them directly. There is also that ancient tower. The ancient tower contains videos of fights of countless experts, and you can study it directly as well. Real God Wu Liang continued to introduce the different places in the Thunderbolt Island. As Jian Wushuang listened on, he became even more dumbfounded. When he first came to the lineage of Star back then, he was already extremely dumbfounded by the excessive training resources that the lineage of Star possessed. However, even though the lineage of Star contained a lot of resources, what was it as compared to the Thunderbolt Island? Could not even be compared. As expected of the Thunderbolt Island, which is the base of the Sanctuary Alliance. It's indeed a place that countless experts yearn to come to. Jian Wushuang gasped in admiration. Under the guidance of Real God Wu Liang, Jian Wushuang came to the middle of the island in no time. Over there, he saw a total of 13 extremely huge palaces. For the 13 palaces, every one of them was like a vast, lofty mountain, and they were split into 2 regions. The first region contained 4 palaces, while the region behind contained 9 palaces. Jian Wushuang. What you are seeing right now is the 13 fairy palaces which are famous in the Thunderbolt Island. Jian Wushuang looked at the lofty palaces before him. Every palace gave him an extremely shocked feeling. Jian Wushuang, follow me. Real God Wu Liang brought Jian Wushuang to the front of those palaces, then they landed on one of the platforms. Real God Wu Liang immediately revealed a humble manner when he landed. Then, at the front of the platform, there was a figure then gradually substantiated. It was a tan-skinned elderly who looked really scrawny in hemp clothes. The elderly looked ugly, but the aura that he gave out was aloof. Almighty! Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes, and he immediately behaved respectfully. Old Snake. Real God Wu Liang greeted politely. Lineage of stars? The tan-skinned, ugly-looking elderly Old Snake glanced at Real God Wu Liang, then at Jian Wushuang. Oh! Old Snake looked surprised, but he quickly resumed normalcy. A universe god who can come to Thunderbolt Island. You should be the inverse cultivator in Lineage of Star. I have heard of you before. As for your name, I can't recall. I'm Jian Wushuang. Greetings, Senior. Jian Wushuang bowed as he replied. Senior. Old Snake laughed. Just call me Old Snake like everyone else. Jian Wushuang. Old Snake is the person in charge of fairy palaces. Whoever intends to enter Fairy Palace on Thunderbolt Island has to acquire his permission. Real God Wu Liang introduced. Oh, I see. Jian Wushuang understood. You want to enter Fairy Palace? Pass me your token of the Fairy Palace's legacy, Old Snake said. Then, Jian Wushuang immediately took out a token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. With this token of the Fairy Palace's legacy, you can choose to enter any Fairy Palace and comprehend for 100 years. You can opt to stay for 100 years in one go, or you can opt to comprehend periodically. Every time you enter to comprehend, you must at least stay for a year, Old Snake said. There are options? Jian Wushuang beamed with joy and smiled. This is my first time entering Fairy Palace. I don't know what I'll encounter. I'll go in to comprehend for 1 year first. Sure. Old Snake nodded. He waved the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy in his hand faintly. Then, he returned the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy to Jian Wushuang. After Jian Wushuang took it back and skimmed through it with soul power, he immediately noticed that there was a number on the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. The number was 99. It meant that I have 99 years left? Jian Wushuang smiled. Jian Wushuang, I heard that you once retrieved the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation by Real God Ju He. Real God Wu Liang suddenly looked at him. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. The painting of understanding sword via reincarnation had provided great help to Jian Wushuang in terms of reincarnation doctrine and sword principle at the beginning. But then, as his comprehension towards reincarnation doctrine and sword principle had continued to increase, the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation wasn't as helpful as before. The painting of understanding sword via reincarnation by Real God Ju He actually was created in the simulation of Fairy Palace. You have the experience of comprehending the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation, so you should be able to avoid the roundabout ways when you are comprehending in Fairy Palace. Real God Wu Liang said. Really? Jian Wushuang looked shocked. You'll know when you go in and try. Real God Wu Liang flashed a mysterious smile. Jian Wushuang walked towards one of the Fairy Palaces immediately without hesitation. Reincarnation Fairy Palace. Jian Wushuang looked at the Fairy Palace before him and smiled. Then, he immediately entered the Fairy Palace. It was a vast and boundless starry night. The starry night stretched as far as his eyes could see, and it was dim. Jian Wushuang was standing right in the middle of the vast starry night. Starry night? This feels just like Real God Hall in Lineage of Star. Jian Wushuang looked confused. But just as he was thinking, the starry night immediately changed. The strange strength that filled the air gathered in the starry night. In the end, it derived into one scroll painting after another. The scroll paintings were scattered around Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took a closer look and realized that there were a total of 27 scroll paintings. The 27 scroll paintings, every one of them was huge. On every scroll painting, there was a mountain that was made of broken stones. Jian Wushuang looked at one of the scroll paintings and he saw every single stone that made out the mountain in the scroll painting. Every single stone gave a distinct feeling to Jian Wushuang. Reincarnation doctrine? Jian Wushuang was stunned and he was enveloped by the scroll painting right in front of him. The mountain in the painting was made of countless stones flawlessly. A total of 11,111 stones. At that very moment, under Jian Wushuang's full attention, every one of the 11,111 stones turned into a part of reincarnation doctrine. This is too magical. Jian Wushuang stared and immediately looked at the other 26 scroll paintings, while the 26 scroll paintings were also mountains that were made of 11,111 stones. Every single stone was part of reincarnation doctrine. A part to the entire reincarnation doctrine could be nothing. But mountains that were formed by 11,111 of parts each played an extremely important position in reincarnation doctrine. 27 scroll paintings. If the 27 mountains were to combine, it would be a complete reincarnation doctrine. I understand. This is dissection. One, or maybe a few, experts who reached a high level in reincarnation doctrine teamed up and dissected the complete reincarnation doctrine in detail. They dissected reincarnation doctrine into 27 parts, and every part was dissected into 11,111 elements, making complications simple. An unbelievable measure. Jian Wushuang's gaze was filled with astonishment. One should know that a complete reincarnation doctrine was unfathomable and it was extremely difficult to study and comprehend. If it were to be dissected perfectly, dissecting reincarnation doctrine into 27 parts would make it much easier to comprehend. It was just like if a person were to eat a big pancake, it would be impossible if a person wanted to eat it all in one. No one would be able to do so. Hence, if he were to cut the pancake into 4 or 8 pieces, it would be much easier to eat. The 27 scroll paintings in Reincarnation Fairy Palace worked on the same principle. No wonder Elder Wu Liang said that the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation by real God Zhu, he derived from Reincarnation Fairy Palace. It was really so. However, real God Zhu, he was only a real god after all. No matter how he simulated, he merely copied part of it. But the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation was still extraordinarily precious. Comparing the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation to the 27 scroll paintings in Reincarnation Fairy Palace, they were miles apart. Jian Wushuang was exclaiming in surprise. Plus, Jian Wushuang also found out that the 27 scroll paintings had not only dissected the reincarnation doctrine so flawlessly and so simply, but the scroll paintings also contained extremely strong guiding power too. The power of guidance guided Jian Wushuang to every picture scroll to comprehend them. 27 picture scrolls. I have already comprehended the first 6 picture scrolls completely, and I am going to comprehend the 7th picture scroll now. Jian Wushuang understood instantly. The 27 picture scrolls were placed according to the 9 levels of the Doctrine Palace. Every 3 picture scrolls represented 1 level. In the aspect of the reincarnation doctrine, Jian Wushuang already possessed the ability to clear the 2nd level of the Doctrine Palace. Hence, he had already comprehended the first 6 picture scrolls completely. What he needed to comprehend at the very moment were the 7th to 9th picture scrolls. By comprehending the hidden secrets within the 3 picture scrolls, he would be able to clear the 3rd level of the Doctrine Palace. Let's begin. Jian Wushuang started to comprehend thoroughly at once. He realized that within the Reincarnation Fairy Palace, his affinity toward the reincarnation doctrine had increased greatly, and it was easier for him to comprehend compared to the outside world. In addition, the shocking technique to make the 27 picture scrolls in front of him easier to comprehend had caused Jian Wushuang's comprehension speed to increase by countless times. In just 1 month's time, Jian Wushuang had completely comprehended the 7th picture scroll. Of course, this was because of the fact that at the very start, Jian Wushuang's level of comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine was already very close to being able to comprehend the 7th picture scroll completely. Next, Jian Wushuang continued to comprehend the 8th picture scroll. Time passed by and 1 year's time was up in no time. Jian Wushuang, who was in the Reincarnation Fairy Palace, was pulled by a kind of power and his body was sent outside the Fairy Palace. It was only after arriving outside the fairy palace that Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and regained his senses from the state of comprehension. It's too engrossing. Even though I felt that I have only comprehended for a short while, 1 year's time passed by already. Jian Wushuang smiled and he was extremely excited. It must be known that during the short 1 year, his comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine improved greatly. He had comprehended the 7th picture scroll completely as well as a portion of the 8th picture scroll. For such an improvement, if he were in the outside world comprehending by himself, he would need at least hundreds of years to achieve the same improvement. In just a short 1 year's time, I have improved so much. Moreover, I still have 99 years, Jian Wushuang smiled. I shall not rush my comprehension in this fairy palace. Since this Thunderbolt Island is full of opportunities everywhere, I shall take a look around first. After Jian Wushuang made up his mind, he left the fairy palace immediately and started to walk around the Thunderbolt Island. As for real god Wu Liang, he had gone to start his own comprehension somewhere else, and it was not possible for Jian Wushuang to follow him all the time. On the island, there were many real gods, and most of them were making the best use of their time to immerse themselves in training. When Jian Wushuang walked past them, most of the real gods did not notice him. However, there were still a small portion of them who noticed him. A universe god? Those real god experts who realized the existence of Jian Wushuang then revealed a surprised expression. However, they understood in no time. In the eternal chaotic world, there is only one person who can come to the Thunderbolt Island as a universe god. Thus, he must be Jian Wushuang of the lineage of Star. Yes, it's him. Previously, I have seen him with real god Wu Liang of the lineage of Star. I also heard that he had gone to the fairy palace as well. He is able to come to the Thunderbolt Island as a universe god. Moreover, he also has the token of the fairy palace's legacy. I'm really envious of him. Those real gods were all whispering. Jian Wushuang ignored them and continued walking. After a short while, he appeared below a stone wall. It was an extremely huge stone wall, and it contained tens of ancient characters that had been carved flamboyantly. Every ancient character was emitting an extremely special aura. As soon as Jian Wushuang saw those ancient characters, his eyes brightened up. Sword principles? Moreover, it's sword principles that are swift, fierce and tough. Jian Wushuang exclaimed with admiration. He could feel that every one of the tens of ancient characters was actually a sword principle. The only difference was in terms of their power. Jian Wushuang sat down below the stone wall with his legs crossed. After that, he closed his eyes and immersed himself in the ancient characters. Those ancient characters were most probably left behind by a first-rate real god who was proficient in sword principles. Although it would not be of much help to Jian Wushuang, it could still give him some inspiration. At the same time that Jian Wushuang was comprehending below the stone wall, on the Thunderbolt Island, there was a purple-armored, handsome man sitting atop a giant rock which was filled with secret patterns with his legs crossed. Real god Tianming. When the sound was heard, a seductive and beautiful married woman appeared beside the giant rock. The purple-armored handsome man opened his eyes slowly and looked over. Do you have something for me? Nothing. I am only here to tell you that the lineage of Star's inverse cultivator has come to the Thunderbolt Island. The seductive and beautiful married woman said. Jian Wushuang? The eyes of real god Tianming, the purple-armored handsome man, shrank immediately. Where is he now? He's before the stone wall that has been left behind by real god Heiju, and it seems like he is comprehending at this very moment. If you go over there, you should be able to find him, the seductive and beautiful woman said. Thank you. After real god Tianming had thanked her, he headed in the direction that Jian Wushuang was in straight away. After seeing that, the seductive and beautiful married woman laughed indifferently. She knew that real god Tianming would be interested in Jian Wushuang. Below the stone wall with tens of ancient characters, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes slowly after comprehending for more than 1 hour. The sword principles within the ancient characters are not of much help to me. However, after comprehending them once, it has allowed me to have some new knowledge of sword principles. Jian Wushuang laughed and he was about to leave. Swoosh! All of a sudden, a purple, glittering light flew over and landed below the stone wall in front of Jian Wushuang. Eh? Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked toward the person who had come. A few real gods who were comprehending below the stone wall were alarmed as well, and they looked over. It's real god Tianming? Those people recognized the identity of the person who had just arrived. After that, they had a puzzled expression. Jian Wushuang. The handsome man who wore purple armor was staring at Jian Wushuang. You are. Jian Wushuang revealed an uncertain expression. Tianming of the Four-Symbol Mansion. Real god Tianming spoke. Four-Symbol Mansion? Jian Wushuang was extremely surprised. There was a considerable amount of hatred between him and the Four-Symbol Mansion. However, the Four-Symbol Mansion could not find an opportunity. Otherwise, they would have killed him without hesitation. Do you have something for me? Jian Wushuang laughed apathetically as he looked at real god Tianming, who was in front of him. If he were to come across experts of the Four-Symbol Mansion somewhere else, he would probably be a bit fearful. However, he was at Thunderbolt Island at that very moment. Not mentioning the fact that real god Tianming who was in front of him was merely a void real god. Even if a chaotic real god were to come personally, Jian Wushuang would not be concerned at all. I heard about you a long time ago. Today, since we have come across each other by chance, do you have the guts to have a duel with me? Real god Tianming said. Have a duel with you? Jian Wushuang's eyes could not help but squint. Is it only a normal duel? Of course not. Since it's a duel, we have to make it interesting. I know that the lineage of Star has given you a token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. I have one with me as well, and I still have 50 years' time left to comprehend. Hence, how about we bet on the time for comprehension? Real god Tianming said. Comprehension time? You can bet with that. Jian Wushuang was shocked. Of course, on Thunderbolt Island, as long as both parties are willing to, they can bet with anything. Not only the time to comprehend in Fairy Palace, but also the time to stay in Thunderbolt Island can be staked. Real god Tianming smiled faintly and said, So, how about it? Do you want to bet? I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Real god Tianming creased his eyebrows. Jian Wushuang, although you're a universe god, you're an inverse cultivator, which equals an ordinary void real god. I am also a void real god. So, it's not like I'm bullying you if we were to battle. Why are you so afraid? Not interested. Jian Wushuang didn't bother with real god Tianming but turned to leave. Jian Wushuang. Real god Tianming watched Jian Wushuang as he left and bellowed. Back in Burning Demon Region, you massacred so many real gods from Four-Symbol Mansion alone. Where's your spirit? Unless you only bully the weak. Are you that kind of person? But no matter what real god Tianming said, Jian Wushuang ignored him. He quickly vanished from real god Tianming's sight. This young man can keep his composure. Real god Tianming squinted his eyes. I thought geniuses like him would definitely be arrogant and wouldn't reject my challenge. Then, I would be able to get some more time to comprehend in Fairy Palace from him. In the end, well, he passed 3 inverse cultivation tests after all. His mental state must not be weak. Provocation wouldn't work on him. It seems like it's impossible to force him to take action. I can only look for other ways. Very soon, real god Tianming left too. On Thunderbolt Island, Jian Wushuang walked around alone. He was wearing a scornful smile. Real god Tianming thought I would be provoked so simply? He said that I'm an inverse cultivator at universe god level. So, it is fair to fight against him who is a void real god, and he said that he wasn't bullying me? He would be only able to scheme against a kid. Jian Wushuang sneered at the thought about real god Tianming. An inverse cultivator at universe god level was truly treated as void real god in eternal chaotic world. There was nothing wrong about that. But that only referred to one aspect, which was divine power. In terms of comprehension towards heaven way and unique skill, there was a vast difference between real god and universe god, especially comprehension towards doctrine. After all, the comprehension power of a real god toward heaven way was much stronger compared to universe god. Hence, when a real god comprehends heaven way, it was naturally much easier compared to a universe god's attempt. With such a condition, real god Tianming had the guts to say that he, who was a void real god asking for a battle with Jian Wushuang on Thunderbolt Island, wasn't bullying him? Thunderbolt Island. A normal threshold requires one to possess the fighting power of an eternal real god. Real god Tianming appeared on Thunderbolt Island with his realm at void real god. He was definitely a top genius too. If I'm not mistaken, his comprehension of Heaven Wei was at least at the passing of the 3rd level in Doctrine Palace. As for a unique skill, it definitely was even more shocking. If I were to fight him now, 80% of the time I'd be at a disadvantage. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Hall Master Yuan exhorted that the opportunity to be on Thunderbolt Island was extremely hard to come by. Especially the time to cultivate in Fairy Palace was even more precious. Under the circumstance where Jian Wushuang wasn't confident, he wouldn't be that stupid to stake comprehension time with real god Tianming. Jian Wushuang flew forward slowly and he appeared above a huge mountain before long. In the middle of the mountain there was a vast barren land. Jian Wushuang could see the towering steels on the barren land from above. This is the place where Elder Wu Liang said that there are countless unique skills? Jian Wushuang was surprised and he immediately landed. Among the countless steels, it was recorded with a unique skill on each steel. Jian Wushuang came to the region of unique skills for swords and looked at one of the steels casually. Jian Wushuang immediately saw the steel contained an image of an expert performing the unique skill. The secret skill is at least a rank 3 real god unique skill, Jian Wushuang thought. Rank 3 real god unique skills can be created by an ordinary chaotic real god. It was nothing in eternal chaotic world. However, a chaotic real god intentionally demonstrated the unique skill and turned it into an image that displayed itself to the audience to comprehend. This itself was a chance that was hard to come by. In the barren land, there were countless steels that contained unique skill images. Jian Wushuang constantly demonstrated and learned. Unique skills that the others had created contained their unique doctrines. Although Jian Wushuang couldn't fully master the unique skill, experiencing the transformation process of the unique skill helped with the development of his personal unique skill too. On the north of Thunderbolt Island, there was a lofty mountain. The mountain covered the expanse of 1/10 of the entire Thunderbolt Island, while the foothill, mid-slope, and the peak of the mountain had various palaces, pavilions, and courtyards scattered around. The mountain was special. The experts who had the right to stay on Thunderbolt Island permanently resided on the mountain. Then, on the mid-slope of the mountain, there was a middle-aged man in a baggy long robe. Real god Li Hua was standing in front of his mansion. Real god Li Hua was a chaotic real god who was extremely close to the real god ranking list. He resided on Thunderbolt Island all year round and he would wander outside occasionally. He had just returned from a trip out. He went through the prohibition of his mansion, then real god Li Hua came to his courtyard in the middle of his mansion. There was a huge pond in the middle of his courtyard. The pond water was made of the extremely precious white flame spirit liquid. One should know that white flame spirit liquid costs 1,000 chaos gem a drop in eternal chaotic world, and there was a big pond of it. Just how luxurious was it? Haha, babies, it has been years. Did you grow bigger? Real god Li Hua smiled as he walked to the pond and overlooked the pond. Then, real god Li Hua's face suddenly changed. The 6 illusory heart carp that I reared, why are they missing? How could it be? Real god Li Hua swept out his consciousness, but he couldn't detect the existence of any illusory heart carp in the pond in his courtyard. Damn it! Who was it? Who stole my illusory heart carp? Real god Li Hua was raging with anger. Illusory heart carp was a celestial beast that had almost extinct in eternal chaotic world. If they were to grow up, it would be extremely helpful for a cultivator's mental state. Hence, they were priceless. Real god Li Hua happened to get 6 illusory heart carp during a coincidental opportunity. He then had been keeping them carefully on Thunderbolt Island. He already took care of them for more than 100,000 years. But then, he had lost his 6 illusory heart carp. I set up a prohibition around my mansion, but there was no response from the prohibition at all. On Thunderbolt Island, there's only one person who can do these filthy things. Real god Li Hua clenched his teeth and he quivered with rage. Bastard! That damn bastard! It was definitely him that stole my illusory heart carp. As real godly Hua was roaring madly about his 6 illusory heart carps, there was an emaciated, short, small body flying about leisurely in a part of the sky of the Thunderbolt Island. I didn't expect that little kid Li Hua to actually get his hands on the illusory heart carps. Moreover, he kept it to himself and did not let anyone know about it. If not for me passing by his mansion by chance, I would still not know that he was actually hiding such good stuff. The emaciated old man laughed in a strange way. He even stuck out his head and licked his lips. The illusory heart carps are extremely delicious. However, it's a pity that there's only 6 of them, which is a bit too little. When I see the little kid Li Hua the next time, I will have to tell him to get more of them. However, he did not know that the real god Li Hua of the very moment even had the intention to kill him. Eh? The emaciated old man stopped moving abruptly, and his extremely small, mouse-like eyes looked down at the wasteland. Stone tablets stood upright on the wasteland, and there were a few people comprehending before them. In particular, one of the people attracted the old man's attention. A universe god? The person who the old man had noticed was Jian Wushuang. He saw that at that very moment, Jian Wushuang was sitting before a stone tablet with his legs crossed and his hands were mimicking the motion of a sword principle. Jian Wushuang did not use the Blood Mountain sword as well as any divine power in the slightest bit. With his fingers as a sword, he depended purely on his own sword essence to practice his sword principle. With that, he would not damage the stone tablets around him. As Jian Wushuang's fingers moved, a total of 10 extremely small sword shadows appeared in the void at once, and they fused together quickly to form a completely new sword shadow. For the new sword shadow, it was obvious that its power had risen greatly. After seeing such a scene, the eyes of the emaciated old man who was above squinted slightly. At the next moment, his body floated downward. Buzz! The sword shadow dissipated and Jian Wushuang also withdrew his fingers. He then opened his eyes. That's wrong. I feel that this stroke of mine still lacks something. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. He had already stayed in the wasteland for 3 days, during which he had studied quite a number of sword principle unique skills. With that, he had got some knowledge and he had practiced his sword principle straight away. However, he was not satisfied with the results of the practice. At that moment, "Hey, little kid!" a strange voice could be heard abruptly. Jian Wushuang was stunned and he turned his head to take a look. He then realized that an emaciated, small, short old man had somehow appeared behind him. The old man's extremely small eyes were emitting a dim light like a gem, and they were staring at Jian Wushuang. When Jian Wushuang saw the old man, he was shocked. Firstly, the emaciated old man could appear behind him so quietly that he was not even detected by Jian Wushuang's soul power. Hence, the emaciated old man was most likely an almighty. If not, he could also be a top chaotic real god who had already awakened the soul fire. It was obvious that Jian Wushuang had the tendency to attract experts. Moreover, the emaciated old man's looks and attire were a bit strange. He had messy hair, he was clothed in tattered black clothes, and his exposed skin was filthy. He was a complete mess. Moreover, there was a neckband on his neck and it was strung with shining white bones. He was extremely weird. "Little kid, you are the inverse cultivator, Jian Wushuang, right?" The strange old man's eyes were glowing with a dim light. His voice was also very screechy and it was extremely unusual. "That's me. May I know to whom I speak?" Jian Wushuang was modest. "You don't need to care who I am. Let me ask you, do you have white blaze fruits with you?" It was obvious that the strange old man's eyes were filled with excitement. Jian Wushuang felt uneasy. However, when he remembered that he was on the Thunderbolt Island where no one dared to act recklessly, he heaved a sigh of relief and he said immediately, "Elder, I have indeed obtained quite a number of white blaze fruits previously. However, I have already handed those white blaze fruits over to the Star Palace Master of the lineage of Star. Hence, I do not have any of them with me now." "You really don't have them? You're not lying, right?" The strange old man's eyes turned grave. "Of course not. Think about it, Elder. I am merely a universe god. Hence, the white blaze fruit is useless to me. Moreover, it might even bring me trouble. As I am not an idiot, Why would I have it on me? Jian Wushuang forced a smile. Yes, that makes sense. The strange old man nodded his head slightly and his face revealed a pitiful expression. What a pity! Originally, I had wanted to get my hands on a few white blaze fruits so that I could try them. Looks like I can only wait for the next time now. I wonder what kind of taste the white blaze fruit has. After finishing his speech, the strange old man could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. After hearing what the strange old man had said to himself, Jian Wushuang had a puzzled expression. The white blaze fruit was an extremely valuable treasure and it was of great use to even almighties. Jian Wushuang had originally thought that the strange old man had wanted the white blaze fruits for training. However, looking at it at that very moment, he actually only wished to have a taste of the white blaze fruit. It was only to eat it? This person is a bit weird, Jian Wushuang sighed. Little kid. The strange old man looked over again. When you meet the Star Palace Master after you return to the lineage of Star, could you talk to him and get me some white blaze fruits? This? Jian Wushuang forced a smile. However, he still replied, I will do my best. Haha, not bad, not bad. You're still sensible. The strange old man nodded his head. Looking at the fact that you're so sensible, I shall give you some tips. Your sword principle just now was a complete mess. Jian Wushuang could not help but be stunned. The wasteland that you're in right now contains countless unique skills. In particular, at the area of unique skills of claw skills, there is a stone tablet which contains a simple claw print and you can go over to take a look at it. After speaking, the strange old man's body changed and he disappeared. As Jian Wushuang looked at the place where the strange old man disappeared from, he became even more baffled. This elder's way of doing things is really strange. However, he should be an almighty and I wonder which almighty of the Sanctuary Alliance he is. Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. After that, without hesitation, he acted in accordance to what the strange old man had said and headed to the area of unique skills of claw skills. As he searched the stone tablets over there, he found the stone tablet that the strange old man had mentioned in the blink of an eye. Claw skills. Jian Wushuang looked at the stone tablet in front of him. There was indeed an extremely simple claw print on the stone tablet. As an almighty, that elder has a wider perception of things. Even though he knows that I am proficient in sword principles, he still made me come over here to study the claw-type unique skill. Hence, there must be something to it. I shall try and see what happens. Jian Wushuang immersed his mind into the stone tablet in front of him. In no time, there was another picture scroll in front of Jian Wushuang. The picture scroll was a blurry shadow that could not be seen clearly. The blurry shadow then changed into an exotic beast that galloped about in the sky with its 4 hooves. The speed was so fast that it was unbelievable. However, all of a sudden, with a change of the blurry shadow, one body changed into 3 bodies instantly. The 3 shadows of the exotic beast then leaped high up into the air and swung out the sharp claws on their hands at the same time. Wow! 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 3 flowing lights grazed. The 3 flowing lights burst out at the same time. Suddenly, they formed a brand new flowing light with a tremendous increase in power. It tore the void into pieces straight away. The image stopped right there and then. Jian Wushuang was dumbfounded and he was stunned on the spot. How could it? There was shock in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The 3 flowing lights weren't strong separately, but when the 3 superposed, the brand new flowing light that was formed was at least 10 times stronger or maybe even more. How is that possible? Jian Wushuang thought that when the 3 attacks of similar power superposed, the newly formed attack would only perform power by 3-fold at the most, even if there wasn't any power dispersed. However, in the image, the 3 flowing lights of similar power overlapped and superposed, and gave out power that was more than 10 times stronger. Then, he associated with the 10 waves that he created. 10 waves was a crystallization of 10 sword shadows that derived from his sword intention, divine power, and comprehension towards doctrine. When the 10 sword shadows superposed together, there was a large amount of power spillage during the process of superposing. Hence, the newly formed sword shadow would at most possess 5 times the power. Jian Wushuang knew about it too. Hence, he had been thinking for ways to familiarize himself with the power superposition skill in order to decrease power spillage. In turn, the brand new sword shadow would be able to explode with a stronger power. However, he had never imagined the 10 sword shadows of similar power could combine and explode 20, 30, or even 100 times the power. He had no idea at all. However, the image before him, I now understand why Senior told me to come before this steel. Jian Wushuang smiled the instant he saw the steel. Jian Wushuang had a brand new understanding about 10 waves that he created. There are different power superposition skills. 10 waves that I created superposed 10 shadows instantly and forcibly. With such a brutal method, no matter how perfect one manages the strength, it will still cause power spillage. But then the image showed. The power superposition skill is obviously different. Besides, the law and order of the strength in the claw were different too. Jian Wushuang muttered, and in the next moment, he continued to watch the demonstration and learn from the image of the unique skill. He watched the 3 flowing lights burst out in the image again. Then, the 3 flowing lights superposed and formed a brand new flowing light. Jian Wushuang watched the process of superposing carefully and felt the law of manipulation of the divine power meticulously. Previously, I thought 1 plus 1 definitely equaled 2. In a similar fashion, if 10 sword shadows of the same power superposed and formed a brand new shadow intention, it could only explode the power by tenfold. But now, I know that as long as the manipulation method is proper, 1 plus 1 could also equal to 3 or 4. Hence, 10 sword shadows of the same power superposed and formed a brand new shadow intention could explode the power by tenfold or even 100-fold. Jian Wushuang smiled as he immersed himself entirely in demonstration and comprehension. On Thunderbolt Island, there were opportunities everywhere. Most of the opportunities required luck. When one was lucky, he would even run into it randomly. Jian Wushuang obviously ran into one. The opportunity that he ran into should be the weird old man. The weird old man guided him and told him about the existence of the steel. If there wasn't the weird old man, it might be impossible for him to find the region for this claw unique skill in his lifetime and stayed back to watch the steel with a simple claw print. He naturally wouldn't have the current opportunity then either. As time flew past, Jian Wushuang continued to stay before the steel. It had been 30 years in total. In the 30 years, there were many real gods who had come there and were shocked when they saw Jian Wushuang. After all, they knew that Jian Wushuang was good with swords. A sword principal cultivator came to the region of claw unique skill to learn about claw unique skills. They didn't understand what Jian Wushuang was doing, but they didn't worry either. At the steel, Jian Wushuang continued to close his eyes. However, his index finger formed a sword. An outstanding sword intention along with power of Heavenway formed 10 small sword lights in the void next to him. As he moved his index fingers, the 10 small sword lights were instantly superposed and overlapped. The power increased tremendously all of a sudden. Haha! I succeeded. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and there was joy across his face. Although I only just began to master the power superposition skill, and the power has already dispersed quite a bit, the brand new sword light still needs to be strengthened by 10 times. This is only the beginning. I am not familiar with the power superposition skill. If I were to continue to comprehend and study, the superpose of sword intention will definitely explode to a stronger power. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands. Continue. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes again and started comprehension. In the void above Jian Wushuang, the weird old man with a white bone necklace overlooked. He also saw the scene where he had performed his sword principle. This young man, in just 30 years, has understood the power superposition skill that I studied painstakingly. Although it is only the beginning, he has already passed the beginner level. Then it is only a matter of time to master and familiarize himself with it entirely. The weird old man squinted his eyes, but his facial expression grew strange. Damn it, when I first studied power superposition skill, I spent a total of 300,000 years of continuous repetitive polishing and perfecting. But this young man, he didn't even put in much effort but only picked it up ready-made and mastered the power superposition skill. No way, no way. Isn't that too easy for him? I went through so much trouble to get it. The weird old man's facial expression looked complicated. He seemed happy yet sad. It was strange. After a while, his gaze suddenly fixed and he made a decision. There was a malicious smile spread across his face. At the steel, Jian Wushuang continued to comprehend carefully. He was already at the beginner level of power superposition skill. The following familiarization and mastering would be much easier, but the time required was more. In the blink of an eye, 50 years passed and Jian Wushuang finally got up. After comprehending for 80 years, I finally mastered the power superposition skill flawlessly. My 10 waves, the brand new sword shadow formed by the superposition of the 10 sword shadows, its power increased by 30 times. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands. 30 times was already the limit of the power superposition skill. Jian Wushuang was content with the result. Because of his 10 waves, the power increased tremendously. And, most importantly, from then on, not only at the level of Universe God but to the level of Real God, it was not necessary for him to create another attack unique skill. In the aspect of attack unique skills, one was enough. 10 waves. No, it should be called myriad waves. It's more suitable. Jian Wushuang wore a smile and he was over the moon. He was clear how impressive the method of power superposition that he had mastered was. The presence of such a method would be a lot better than the attack power unique skills that he would use a lot of time and energy to create in the future. Take the 10 waves move as an example. Previously, this move had only barely reached the requirement of being a high-level stage 2 Real God unique skill. However, by mastering the power superposition skill at that very moment, the 10 waves move would definitely be equivalent to a stage 2 peak Real God unique skill. Moreover, he could also continue to develop the 10 waves move in the future. After all, 10 waves was the fusion of 10 sword shadows which were created by Jian Wushuang using his own sword essence. His understanding of sword principles, as well as his comprehension of the power of Heaven Wei. As his sword principles and his comprehension of the power of Heaven Wei improves in the future, he would definitely be able to create 11, 12, or even more shadows. Hence, the power of the move would continue to get stronger. 10 waves could absolutely become 20 waves, 30 waves, and even 100 waves. As such, Jian Wushuang said that 10 waves was not suitable to be the name of this move. Instead, myriad waves was the most suitable name. As Jian Wushuang was thinking, all of a sudden, an emaciated body appeared in front of him again. "Ah, Elder." Jian Wushuang looked toward the person who had appeared, and he had a modest expression. He was certain that it was because of the advice of the Elder in front of him that he could master the power superposition skill. As such, he naturally felt indebted to the Elder. "Little kid, let me ask you, have you ever had a master?" The strange old man looked toward Jian Wushuang. "I have." Jian Wushuang nodded his head instinctively. The eyes of the strange old man squinted slightly and he raised his voice. "Is that master of yours dead or alive now?" "That?" Jian Wushuang frowned and he said immediately, "Of course he is still alive." "Then, if I wish for you to cut ties completely with that master of yours and have me as your only master for the rest of your life, would you be willing to do so?" The strange old man said. "I'm not willing." Jian Wushuang shook his head straight away. The strange old man in front of him had indeed given him some advice and he was grateful for that. However, the strange old man actually wanted him to betray his master for that. Was that a joke? "Waya yaya." The strange old man laughed weirdly and his eyes turned completely red. "Damn little kid, you have learnt the power superposition skill that I have taken lots of effort to create and in the end, you are unwilling to have me as your master? Do you believe that I will kill you straight away, or even kill your master who is supporting you?" After hearing what was said, Jian Wushuang could not help but be stunned. Previously, the strange old man in front of him had gone out of his way to give him advice to comprehend the stone tablet. However, after he had learnt the power superposition skill, the strange old man had become dissatisfied and wanted to snatch him forcefully to become his disciple. What the hell was going on? "Elder, I am very grateful to you for giving me advice and helping me learn this power superposition skill. However, it is impossible for me to betray my master just because of this. As for Elder being furious and wanting to kill me, you can go ahead and do it. However, this place is the Thunderbolt Island. Thus, I believe that Elder should be cautious as well. As for my master..." Jian Wushuang laughed indifferently. My master left me and went somewhere else a long time ago. Even I have no idea where he is. If Elder wishes to kill him, you may go ahead and do it straight away. Little kid, are you trying to say that I'm unable to do anything to you? The strange old man stared at Jian Wushuang. That's not what I mean. I am thankful for Elder's advice and I will always remember this debt in my mind. However, it is impossible for me to give up on my own master, Jian Wushuang said. Remember the debt in your mind? The strange old man rolled his eyes and laughed weirdly. How about this? If you are really grateful to me, after you return to the lineage of Star, get some white blaze fruits for me to try. I do not need a lot, just 3 will do. 3 white blaze fruits? Jian Wushuang was shocked. 1 white blaze fruit was already extremely precious. However, the strange old man had asked for 3 right away. It was really daylight robbery. Elder, I really wish to know what you want the white blaze fruits for. Is it really for the purpose of eating? Jian Wushuang asked doubtfully. Of course. The strange old man laughed. In my whole life, I have had nothing that I liked. What I like most is to eat and try all the flavors in the world. Moreover, the more difficult it is to get the item, the better it is. For example, the white blaze fruit is exceptionally rare and, to date, I still have not tried it. All right. Jian Wushuang had no choice. Elder, I have no guarantee as to whether I can help you get 3 white blaze fruits. However, if you really want delicious fruits, I actually have some of them with me and I wonder if Elder will like any of them. After his speech, Jian Wushuang took out some precious fruits. Those fruits were obtained from experts who were killed by Jian Wushuang. Hence, there were definitely some rare and precious treasures. However, when the strange old man saw the fruits that Jian Wushuang had taken out, he regarded them as beneath his notice. He only took an additional glance at a purple-red fruit. After that, he extended his hands and grabbed the purple-red fruit. Among all your items, only this dark silk fruit can be considered decent. As the strange old man spoke, he took a bite of the fruit. However, taking a bite, he threw the fruit away. Its taste is only normal. After seeing such a scene, Jian Wushuang's heart could not help but shrink. It should be known that the dark silk fruit was worth about 200 million chaos gems in the eternal chaotic world. If it were doctrine gems, the dark silk fruit would be worth 2 of them, which were almost equivalent to all the treasures of an eternal real god. However, the strange old man threw the fruit away after taking just 1 bite of it. Little kid, I shall not make things difficult for you anymore. If you are able to get some white blaze fruits in the future, go ahead and get them. If you are unable to get them, you will still have to get me something rare such as the illusory heart carp, which is a celestial bird. Also, I will stay on Thunderbolt Island. If you are able to get something delicious in the future, you can use this token to contact me. The strange old man threw a token to Jian Wushuang and left straight away. After Jian Wushuang caught the token, he still had an extremely puzzled expression. What a weird person. After talking to me for so long and even wanting to make me his disciple, I still don't know his name. Jian Wushuang shook his head and laughed. He then put the token in his Qian Kuan ring. At that moment, Jian Wushuang, how is Thunderbolt Island? Hall Master Yuan messaged. Not too bad, Jian Wushuang answered. I heard from the people that during this period of time in the Thunderbolt Island, you have been comprehending in front of a tablet with records of a claw-type unique skill. What's going on? Hall Master Yuan questioned. I have my own reasons for comprehending over there. Jian Wushuang did not explain too much. Yes, as long as it's of use to you. It is up to you to decide how you want to train on the Thunderbolt Island. However, remember not to waste this opportunity. After his speech, Hall Master Yuan cut the transmission. Jian Wushuang grinned. It's about time for me to head to the Fairy Palace. Fairy Palace had been of unbelievable help towards the power of Heaven Wei. I have 2 tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy and could return to Reincarnation Fairy Palace and Spacetime Fairy Space for 100 years respectively. In the next 100 years, I could divide it into 10 times and every time I spend 10 years in there, I would have 3,000 years to cultivate on Thunderbolt Island. So, I shall go to Reincarnation Fairy Palace and Spacetime Palace on rotation once. Then I will cultivate on Thunderbolt Island for 280 years. 280 years later, I shall comprehend for the second time. I shall set 300 years as one term. With such an allocation, when I finish my time limit for both fairy palaces, I will happen to fulfill a 3,000-year time limit on Thunderbolt Island. It will be a better cultivation effect too. Jian Wushuang made his mind. He immediately entered Reincarnation Fairy Palace. He stayed in Reincarnation Fairy Palace for 9 years. Then he headed over to Spacetime Fairy Palace for 10 years. Both Spacetime Fairy Palace and Reincarnation Fairy Palace were similar. They both had 27 scroll paintings and the effect was identical. Along with the comprehension, Jian Wushuang immersed himself in the cultivation opportunities on Thunderbolt Island and in Cultivation. Under such a logical allocation, in the blink of an eye, about 1,500 years passed. To be exact, 1,520 years. Jian Wushuang slowly walked out from the fairy palace and glanced at the fairy palace behind him. There was a faint smile plastered on his face. The 6th time. I comprehend for 10 years on each visit, and I have comprehended 60 years each in both Reincarnation Fairy Palace and Spacetime Fairy Palace. Now, the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy only has 40 years left each. However, this 40-year quota might not be put to use anytime soon. Jian Wushuang smiled. 1,520 years. Jian Wushuang went to Reincarnation Fairy Palace and Spacetime Fairy Palace twice. But then, he didn't plan to comprehend in both fairy palaces again in the near future. It was because his comprehension towards Heaven Way had already reached the limit his current realm could achieve. He already comprehended the first 10th scroll paintings in both Reincarnation Doctrine and Spacetime Doctrine. One should know that the 27 scroll paintings in Fairy Palace corresponded with the 9th level in Doctrine Palace. When one understood the first 9 scroll paintings, it meant that one could pass through the 3rd level of Doctrine Palace. As he understood the 10th scroll paintings, it meant that not only did he pass through the 3rd level of Doctrine Palace, he even took a step in the 4th level of Doctrine Palace. The 2 doctrines that he understood had already reached a level. Not only in comprehension towards Heaven Way but in all aspects it seems to be so. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands. With the aid of Thunderbolt Island's designated place to train consciousness, his soul power broke through and reached the level of an eternal real god in the 1,520 years. In unique skill, his myriad waves also increased to his extreme limit that he could reach. In each aspect, he had already reached his limit. He already lost the possibility to continue to improve. In other words, he had already achieved the 3rd conditions to break through and become a real god. One should know that he had just passed through the 3rd inverse cultivation test. If he were to cultivate by himself in the outside world, he wouldn't know how long it would take for him to reach the limit of his current realm. On Thunderbolt Island, with the aid of Fairy Palace, with the aid of opportunities on Thunderbolt Island, he had already achieved it in 1,550 years. From this itself, he could see the rarity of Thunderbolt Island. No wonder there were so many experts in chaotic real god who wanted to cultivate there. I have achieved the first 3 conditions to break through and become real god. Now, there's only one last condition left, which is the opportunity to break through. Jian Wushuang muttered to himself as he walked. Opportunity to break through. It was the most uncertain condition among the 4 conditions to break through and become a real god. Opportunity and luck came as they wished. If one was unlucky, it might not even come in 100 or a few 100,000 years. Jian Wushuang could do nothing about it. Jian Wushuang suddenly looked to the side and there were some noises. It should be where the fighting space is located. I have been in Thunderbolt Island for so long but I've never been there, Jian Wushuang thought, and immediately walked toward the fighting space. It looked just like an ordinary battle ring. In the middle of the battle ring there was a layer of prohibition. Under the coverage of the prohibition, the battlefield was extremely huge. The boundless battlefield was fighting space. The cultivators on Thunderbolt Island fought against one another and learned from one another in the fighting space. The life and death space was located in another place. Jian Wushuang came to the battlefield and saw many experts in the surroundings while there was a vigorous fight going on in the fighting space. The 2 opponents in the vigorous fight, one was an eternal real god while the other was someone Jian Wushuang knew. Real God Tianming from Four Symbol Mansion. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Such a coincidence. I come here and immediately run into real God Tianming in a battle. When Jian Wushuang first came to Thunderbolt Island previously, real God Tianming had found him and wanted to battle with him. The bet was 50 years of cultivation time in Fairy Palace. However, Jian Wushuang had rejected him. Then, in the fighting space, there should be a bet between real God Tianming and the other eternal real God as well. Both of them were fighting with their all. However, it was obvious that under the similar divine power explosion, real God Tianming's comprehension of Heaven Wei was stronger by one notch compared to an eternal real God's. From the beginning of the battle, real God Tianming had the upper hand. Even when the battle ended, nothing changed. In the end, the one who won was naturally real God Tianming. Haha! Real God Yuluo, thank you for your 800 years cultivation time. Real God Tianming laughed. 800 years? Jian Wushuang looked surprised. Then, he understood that the 800 years should be referring to cultivation time on Thunderbolt Island, not cultivation time in Fairy Palace. As long as he was an expert in Sanctuary Alliance, he could cultivate 3,000 years on Thunderbolt Island in every 100,000 years. The 3,000 years cultivation time was very important to experts in Sanctuary Alliance, and he had lost 800 years in one go. Real God Yuluo must be full of heartache. As expected, he saw real God Yuluo walk out of the fighting space in distress. In the fighting space, real God Tianming smirked coldly. Yuluo, that dumbass. I intentionally showed my white feather before him, and he really thought I was not his match. 800 years of cultivation time on Thunderbolt Island is not too shabby. Real God Tianming was thinking, but he suddenly saw a figure outside fighting space. He immediately squinted his eyes and immediately let out a hearty laugh. Isn't that the top genius of Lineage of Star, Jian Wushuang? Do you have the guts to compete with me? Real God Tianming's voice could be heard from the fighting space, and many real gods looked at Jian Wushuang at once. Seems like this real God Tianming still remembers the training time of mine in the Fairy Palace. Jian Wushuang laughed, and he leaped onto the fighting space. Real God Tianming was sneering at Jian Wushuang. He had originally thought that Jian Wushuang would not dare to fight with him. At that very moment, he merely spoke so that he would make Jian Wushuang lose face. However, he did not expect Jian Wushuang to actually come to the fighting space. This little kid has actually come in. Real God Tianming's smile froze at once, and he became elated after that. Jian Wushuang, are we still going to bet on the training time in the Fairy Palace? How many years do you wish to bet on? Jian Wushuang walked over slowly, and he appeared in front of real God Tianming in the blink of an eye. Last time, when you had only just come to the Thunderbolt Island, you still had a lot of training time in the Fairy Palace. Hence, I wanted to bet 50 years' time with you. However, you have stayed in the Thunderbolt Island for quite some time now, and you have definitely used up a considerable amount of training time in the Fairy Palace. Thus, we shall not bet 50 years this time around. How about just 20 years? Real God Tianming said. In actual fact, he really wanted to bet 50 years with Jian Wushuang. However, he was worried that Jian Wushuang would be like the previous time when he was stunned. As such, he said 20 years instead. 20 years? No problem. Jian Wushuang nodded his head straight away. Haha. Great. Real God Tianming laughed loudly. The Blood Mountain sword had already appeared in Jian Wushuang's hands, and sword essence rose from his body. When real God Tianming bet a match with me 1,500 years ago, I had no confidence at all, and I could only decline. But now, my abilities have already reached the maximum that I could attain as a universe god of the third heaven. Thus, as of the current moment, I am not afraid of real God Tianming in the slightest bit. The most important thing now is that I'm still lacking an opportunity to make a breakthrough. Since someone wants to bet on a match with me, how can I reject him? Jian Wushuang laughed apathetically, and his eyes were overflowing with coldness. The whole fighting space became completely dead silent. Outside the fighting space, many experts were observing the match closely. All of a sudden, swish! Jian Wushuang moved right away. A total of 100 shadows burst forth at once. Every shadow was as fast as a ghost, and they were shuttling back and forth in the space. In a split second, The whole fighting space was filled with shadows that were moving around crazily. What a strange martial art motion. Its speed is extremely fast. In order to execute such a kind of martial art motion, it would minimally require one's comprehension of the spacetime doctrine to be able to clear the third level of the Doctrine Palace. The real gods who were observing the match from outside the fighting space were surprised. As they were all quite experienced, they were all certain as to what an impressive level of comprehension of the spacetime doctrine Jian Wushuang must be at in order for his shadows to have such a speed. When real god Tianming saw so many shadows which could cover the sky, he laughed coldly. This is nothing. As soon as the words left his mouth, real god Tianming held the silver long rod in his hands tightly and swung it in front of him fiercely. Rumble, rays of silver light appeared. Initially, there was only one long rod. However, at that very moment, thousands upon thousands of rays of silver, glittering light that were formed by the silver long rod had appeared abruptly, and they covered the whole space completely. They then headed toward Jian Wushuang's shadows and covered them, causing every shadow to be pierced and dissipate straight after. In the end, only Jian Wushuang's real body alone was left. However, Jian Wushuang simply took a few simple strides, and he easily avoided the rays of silver, glittering light that were heading toward him just like fish which were escaping hurriedly. His body then appeared in front of real god Tianming. The Blood Mountain sword was swung out instantly. The stroke contained a real god's divine power that Jian Wushuang could unleash at that very moment, as well as reincarnation power. Real god Tianming also held his rod with both his hands, and he swung it abruptly. Bam! Jian Wushuang and real god Tianming's body were forced to retreat by quite a number of steps due to the impact. Reincarnation doctrine? Real god Tianming frowned and glanced at Jian Wushuang. Haha! Time to try this move. Jian Wushuang laughed apathetically. With a swing of his big hands, mighty reincarnation power appeared and changed into a gray air current. The gray air current was then combined and changed into a big gray world. Straight away after that, the gray world headed toward real god Tianming. That's Reincarnation world. What a guy! This is only something an expert can execute when his comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine is able to clear the third level of the Doctrine Palace. This Jian Wushuang is merely a universe god. However, his comprehension of the spacetime doctrine and reincarnation doctrine has achieved the standards to clear the third level of the Doctrine Palace. Impressive! The experts who were observing the match from outside the fighting space could not help but be shocked. When real god Tianming saw such a scene, his eyes shrank. Power of all creation! Break! As real god Tianming shouted, within the fighting space, buzz, green mist which could cover the sky burst forth. At the same time, vegetation appeared in the sky out of thin air with many tall and strong trees rising upward. In particular, the most humongous tree was at least over 10,000 feet tall. At that very moment, the whole fighting space became full of life and blocked off the gray world completely. This is life doctrine. Jian Wushuang's eyes turned grave. The vast heavenway was split into the Supreme Four Doctrines and the 9 Heaven God Doctrines. Within the Supreme Four Doctrines, apart from the Reincarnation Doctrine, Spacetime Doctrine, and Extermination Doctrine, the last remaining doctrine was the Life Doctrine. For the Life Doctrine, life would grow and multiply endlessly. At that very moment, the move that real god Tianming had unleashed was one of the techniques of the Life Doctrine known as Power of All Creation. Jian Wushuang, I admit that your abilities are stronger than what I have expected. However, the end result will still be the same. Real god Tianming was surrounded by endless vegetation, and he had a huge amount of aura. With a swing of the silver long rod in his hands, rumble, an enormous amount of vegetation around him stretched outward crazily and headed toward Jian Wushuang like spiritual snakes. Jian Wushuang's body was shrouded in sword essence. The sword essence then changed into numerous rays of sword lights in a split second and headed toward the spiritual snakes which were charging toward him. The spiritual snakes were torn apart by the rays of sword light into pieces. However, many spiritual snakes continued to attack, and it was endless as it seemed that they were growing and multiplying endlessly. It's useless. This is the life realm that real God Tianming's power of all creation created. The vegetation within the realm will grow and multiply endlessly. Even if they are cut off, they will grow again. Unless one is able to use brute force to destroy the whole life realm, real God Tianming will be invincible. Real God Tianming's comprehension of the life doctrine is too high, and it is probably very close to being able to clear the 4th level of the Doctrine Palace. Among the 27 picture scrolls of the Life Fairy Palace, he has most probably comprehended the 11th picture scroll completely already. The real gods who were watching the battle from outside of fighting space were exclaiming in surprise. They also knew how impressive real God Tianming's technique was. As long as the life realm existed, he would secure an invincible position. Virum. A fierce sword light swept and directly tore the soul snakes that swarmed over him into pieces, but at the next moment, there were more soul snakes that came straight ahead again. Humph! Jian Wushuang harumphed coldly, and there were crimson flames soaring up surrounding him. Suddenly it formed a vast sea of fire, and he was the emperor in the sea of fire. The life realm was engulfed among the sea of fire, but it didn't weaken it at all. This is never-ending. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. It seems that I have to break his realm entirely. Then Jian Wushuang held Blood Mountain's sword with both his hands and raised them up. The moment he raised the sword, there were sword shadows that crystallized one after another in the fighting space. The sword shadows were extremely huge. They were formed by a combination of Jian Wushuang's sword intention and his power of Heaven Wei. Along with Jian Wushuang's tremendous enhancement in comprehension towards Heaven Wei, the size of the sword shadows grew a lot bigger and the power became a lot stronger. At that very moment, there were 16 sword shadows that appeared in the fighting space simultaneously. One should know that when Jian Wushuang first came to Thunderbolt Island, even if he gave his all, not only could he crystallize just 10 sword shadows, but their size and power also wasn't that huge. The 16 sword shadows floated in the air. Every single one of the sword shadows possessed the power to destroy heaven and earth. It was sufficient for an ordinary eternal real god to deal with it solemnly. However, the next moment the 16 sword shadows superposed at a terrifying speed. Jian Wushuang performed the power superposition skill. Hong! A brand new sword shadow appeared in the universe. The size of the sword shadow was a few times bigger than the 16 sword shadows, and the power, when the 10 sword shadows had superposed previously, the power had increased by 30 times. But then, when the 16 sword shadows superposed, the power had increased by 48 times impressively. Rumble. The moment the sword shadow appeared, the terrifying pressure pressed over wantonly. In the fighting space, real God Tianming, who was at the core of Life Realm, his pupils contracted at the sight of the sword shadow. Outside the fighting space, the real gods who were watching the battle revealed a shocked expression. This power, is it a rank 2 real god's strongest unique skill? The level of unique skill is undetermined, but, in terms of power, it has already reached rank 2 strongest. My goodness! A universe god has created a rank 2 real god's strongest unique skill. The real gods who were watching the battle were dumbfounded. Plus, almost all of them were eternal real gods. Even among them, there were very few who had created rank 2 real god's strongest unique skills. After all, rank 2 real god's strongest unique skill was normally created by the eternal real gods on top. But then, they didn't know that the unique skill that Jian Wushuang had yet to reach the level in the actual face. It was power superposition skill that had enabled him to perform myriad waves and enhanced the power to be compared favorably with a rank 2 real god's strongest unique skill. Be gone! Jian Wushuang's voice was cold, and the sword shadow that gave out terrifying pressure charged towards the life realm where real God Tianming was. There was a harsh gale, and real God Tianming's teeth were shivering. Bastard! Don't expect to defeat me! Hong! The entire fighting space shook vigorously, and real God Tianming in the life realm saw the flowers and plants that filled the sky suddenly grew luxuriantly and gathered at a terrifying speed. In the end, it gathered into a strong hand of life. The hand contained boundless vigor, and under the manipulation of real God Tianming, it clawed the sword shadow that was slashing at lightning speed. At the same time, real God Tianming wielded a silver club in his hand. Under a flash of silver light, A huge club that seemed to extend from the ancient times suddenly shook heaven and earth and swung out. Very soon, both parties collided. The hand of life immediately caught the sword shadow that Jian Wushuang had thrown, but it didn't withstand it for long. Then, there was a cracking noise. The hand cracked from the middle, and in a short instance, the hand that gathered the power of life realm shattered. Then, the sword shadow continued to clash against the huge club that real god Tianming wielded. There was a loud bang as though there were two worlds that clashed against each other ferociously. The huge club instantly collapsed along with the life realm, along with real god Tianming's body. They were pressed down by the sword shadow. Vroom! Everything in the fighting space suddenly quieted down. Jian Wushuang was still standing there without damage, and he slowly put Blood Mountain's sword into its scabbard. Before him, real god Tianming stood there, and his aura didn't weaken, but his face grew grave. Real god Tianming, you lost. Jian Wushuang's voice was calm. Real god Tianming heard what he said, and his body quivered. Lost, he had really lost. Jian Wushuang pressed him down with just one stroke. The reason why he was standing there without damage was due to the fighting space. However, real god Tianming found it hard to accept the result. He couldn't imagine that in merely 1,500 years, Jian Wushuang's power had increased to such a level. Similarly, on Thunderbolt Island, I also went to Fairy Palace for comprehension. My improvement in the past 1,500 years wasn't small either. However, his improvement is obviously much greater than mine. Real god Tianming glared at Jian Wushuang. Sometimes, between people, there was really no comparison required. Real god Tianming thought he was a top genius. He was a void real god who reached the threshold of chaotic real god in comprehension of life doctrine, which was outstanding. However, Jian Wushuang was obviously more impressive than he was. I agreed to bet, and I accept loss. 20 years of cultivation time in Fairy Palace. Here you go. Real god Tianming said. Thank you. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Real god Tianming didn't speak again but turned to walk out of the fighting space. He had yet to leave the fighting space entirely, but he had noticed that there was a figure that had plunged into the fighting space from the corner of the battlefield. This is Monster King. Real god Tianming was stunned, and he stopped his steps instantly. The person was in a black robe and his face was cold. The most eye-catching part was his right cheek. It was covered in a black, secretive pattern, which was ferocious-looking. He came before real god Tianming and glanced at him. Top genius in four-symbol mansion lost to a universe god. Tianming, you're useless. The person who had come sneered at real god Tianming impolitely. Although real god Tianming was dissatisfied, he did not dare to talk back to him. Instead, he continued to head outside the fighting space. After real god Tianming left, only Jian Wushuang and the black-robed gloomy man remained in the fighting space. You are. Jian Wushuang looked toward the person in front of him with doubt. Monster King of the Soaring Heaven King Palace, the black-robed gloomy man said. Monster King. Jian Wushuang became shocked at once. Since he had stayed in the Thunderbolt Island for many years, he naturally knew about some experts in the Thunderbolt Island. Hence, he had heard of the Monster King before. The Monster King was an exceptional genius of the Soaring Heaven King Palace. At the same time, he was also recognized as the #1 void real god in the Thunderbolt Island as well as the whole eternal chaotic world. It was rumored that although he was only a void real god, his comprehension of the heaven way was at a higher level than a normal chaotic real god. Thus, he was definitely an exceptional genius. Although real god Tianming was someone who was extremely impressive among the void real gods, he was still incomparable to the Monster King. That was the reason real god Tianming did not talk back even though the Monster King sneered at him. Jian Wushuang, are you interested in having a duel with me? The Monster King stared at him. As for the stakes of the duel, we shall bet what you have bet with real god Tianming. How about it? No problem. Jian Wushuang nodded his head with a laugh. Since 20 years' time of training in the Fairy Palace was won from the duel, it can be considered worth it if it is used to fight with the #1 void real god. Oh? The Monster King raised the corners of his mouth. He had not expected Jian Wushuang to agree so easily. Since that's the case, let's fight. I will let you have the first move. Please show me your full power, the Monster King said. Jian Wushuang did not stand on ceremony. A great amount of reincarnation power appeared immediately, changed into a huge gray world and headed toward the Monster King. Moreover, close to 100 shadows appeared from Jian Wushuang's body instantly, and every shadow shuttled back and forth in the void like a ghost. The Monster King stood at his position and allowed the gray world to attack him. However, when the gray world was about to cover him completely, all of a sudden, a thunderbolt which could cover the whole sky started to spread all around. These purple thunderbolts contained extremely violent power, and they smashed the gray world into pieces instantly. After that, they continued to spread, and the whole fighting space turned into a purple thunderbolt pond in the blink of an eye. As Jian Wushuang's shadows were also within the purple thunderbolt pond, they were affected by the purple thunderbolt's power, and many of them dissipated. Even Jian Wushuang's real body, which was on the move, was flooded with the purple thunderbolt, and it experienced the baptism of the thunderbolt's power, which caused him to feel pain. What frightening power the thunderbolt has! The Monster King has probably comprehended the sacred thunder doctrine of the Nine Heaven God doctrine. Moreover, his level of comprehension is very high, and it definitely possesses the power to clear the fourth level of the Doctrine Palace. Jian Wushuang was amazed. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang realized abruptly that a dagger had appeared on the Monster King's hands at some point in time. That was a pitch-black dagger that was as black as Chinese ink. Although it looked normal, it was actually emitting a gloomy, cold luster. Jian Wushuang, your martial art motion is indeed not too bad. However, it's a pity that your level of comprehension of the spacetime doctrine is too low. The Monster King laughed nonchalantly. All of a sudden, his body changed and he disappeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Where is he? Jian Wushuang released his soul power straight away. However, all of a sudden, his whole body was filled with fear as he realized that the Monster King had already appeared behind him. Moreover, the gloomy and cold dagger had already headed toward his body. This speed! Jian Wushuang's whole face was filled with disbelief. It was too fast. The Monster King's speed was too fast. To be more exact, his level of comprehension of the spacetime doctrine was really high. If Jian Wushuang's guess was not wrong, the Monster King's comprehension of the spacetime doctrine was at a higher level than his comprehension of the Sacred Thunder doctrine. For the Sacred Thunder doctrine, the Monster King could at most clear the fourth level of the Doctrine Palace. However, for the spacetime doctrine, he was probably already very close to the fifth level of the Doctrine Palace. With such frightening speed, Jian Wushuang could absolutely not block the attack in time. Hence, the dagger stabbed Jian Wushuang without any obstruction. Buzz! Waves were created on the void. Jian Wushuang stood at his position like before. However, the match had already ended. Jian Wushuang, an inverse cultivator. Even people from the outside world say that you are the #1 genius of the eternal chaotic world. However, looking at it now, you are nothing more than this, the Monster King sneered. With your abilities, you can only defeat trash at the level of real God Tianming at best. If you wish to compete with me, you are still very far away. After hearing what was said, Jian Wushuang's eyes squinted, and he was unaffected. He then said, I had no intention of challenging you from the beginning. Since I have lost now, I just need to find an opportunity in the future to beat you. After laughing, Jian Wushuang was not too concerned about the duel, and he headed outside the fighting space straight away. As for the Monster King, as he stared at Jian Wushuang's back, his expression turned grave. As an exceptional genius, he is neither conceited nor rash, and he did not care about my taunting in the slightest bit. Moreover, his speed of growth is indeed frightening. He actually managed to defeat real God Tianming after being in the Thunderbolt Island for only 1,500 years. This Jian Wushuang is a very formidable opponent. Seems like I have to report this matter upwards to allow them to have a new assessment of Jian Wushuang, so that they will get rid of such a hazard as soon as possible. The Monster King's eyes were filled with some murderous intent. However, he managed to conceal his murderous intent so well that no one realized it. After that, the Monster King also left the fighting space as if nothing had happened. After fighting with the Monster King, Jian Wushuang left the fighting space and he was moving around randomly in the Thunderbolt Island. The Monster King is indeed powerful, Jian Wushuang gasped in admiration. Discounting his divine power and unique skills, looking at his comprehension of the power of Heaven Way alone, although a void real god like him was comprehending two Heaven Ways at the same time, both of them were actually at the level that was enough to clear the fourth level of the Doctrine Palace. In particular, his space-time doctrine was extremely close to the fifth level. He was indeed a monster. No wonder he was recognized as the number one among the void real gods. Jian Wushuang, you are actually more impressive than the Monster King. After all, you are only a universe god. A universe god's affinity toward the power of Heaven Way cannot be compared to a real god at all. Moreover, a universe god also has its own limits. However, once you make a breakthrough to a real god, your comprehension of the power of Heaven Way will no longer be restricted. After you have made a breakthrough to a real god, your level of comprehension of the power of Heaven Way will definitely be greater than that of the Monster King. The King of Venomous Worms' voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. That is absolutely right. However, the fact is, I'm still incomparable to him now. Jian Wushuang shook his head and laughed. I wonder when I can make a breakthrough to become a real god. Jian Wushuang, since you have already attained the maximum achievement in each and every area, you are unable to improve any further. Hence, it will be useless for you to stay in the Thunderbolt Island. So, what plans do you have from now on? The King of Venomous Worms questioned. I've never thought about it. Jian Wushuang shook his head and smiled. To him, then, the most important thing was to break through and become real god. However, the only thing that he lacked to break through and become a real god was a breakthrough opportunity. Breakthrough opportunities came as they wished. It was uncertain and he didn't know what he needed to do next. As you don't have any plan, do what I said. Let's head to Ancient God Sanctuary. King of Venomous Worms said. Ancient God Sanctuary? Jian Wushuang was stunned. Where the ancient god resides? Yes, King of Venomous Worms nodded. In Eternal Chaotic World, there are not only you human cultivators, but there are also other special tribes. You humans have 10 cultivation sanctuaries while the special tribes have 4 sanctuaries too. Among the 4 sanctuaries, Ancient God Sanctuary is one of them. Ancient God Sanctuary naturally honors ancient gods, as you have the bloodline of ancient god and it is royal ancient gods. It is a pity that you only have the bloodline but never inherit the complete ancient god. There are many massacre tricks and secret skill of ancient god that you don't know how to use. But when you arrive at Ancient God Sanctuary, you'll be able to obtain and master these techniques or secret skill. By then, you who are a royal ancient god will be able to give full play to corresponding power. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows at what King of Venomous Worms said. It was true that he was already a 5-star royal ancient god then, but when he was fighting against other people, he only triggered the power of ancient god to increase his attack power, or he would perform the ancient god unique skill that he had learned. Besides that, ancient god bloodline didn't bring about much greater help to him. It wasn't because the ancient god bloodline wasn't strong enough, but because he had no idea on how to use the power of ancient god. Back in Firmament territory in Greenfire World, he stayed with an ancient god tribe for a while. However, the tribe was too weak. The strongest from the tribe was only a 3- or 4-star ancient god, and they only possessed simple massacre tricks and secret skills. It could only be performed by a 3-star ancient god at most. Once one reached 4-star, it was hard to put them to use. Jian Wushuang was already a 5-star ancient god, and he had already reached the limit of a 5-star ancient god. He was going to break through and become a 6-star ancient god soon. The previous massacre tricks and secret skills couldn't be put to use at all. Just then, he naturally needed to find ancient god massacre tricks and secret skills that were suitable for him. Then, he would be able to give full play to his royal ancient god bloodline. King of Venomous Worms, do you know where Ancient God Sanctuary is? Jian Wushuang asked. Of course I do. Although it is rather far from your human 10 cultivation sanctuaries, Sanctuary Alliance definitely has a wormhole that connects directly to the surrounding of Ancient God Sanctuary. You can ask Hall Master Yuan in Lineage of Star about it. He will tell you, King of Venomous Worms said. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly, then he took out the token to communicate with Hall Master Yuan. Jian Wushuang, you want to go to Ancient God Sanctuary? Hall Master Yuan looked surprised. Yes, Jian Wushuang said. I have the bloodline of Ancient God and I am at a pretty high level. It's a pity that I have no way to give full play to my bloodline. So, I have to make a trip there personally. But you're only a universe god. The Ancient God Sanctuary is where the special tribes reside. In Eternal Chaotic World, although Sanctuary Alliance is supreme, they wouldn't be able to get involved with the matter regarding the special tribes sanctuaries. Hence, if you were to run into any danger in Ancient God Sanctuary, even Sanctuary Alliance couldn't do anything about it, Hall Master Yuan said. I know, but my power already reached the limit of a universe god and there was no room for improvement anymore. I do not know how long it will take until I break through and become real god. Hence, I can only head over there, Jian Wushuang said. I see. Hall Master Yuan understood. As you have already decided, go ahead. However, the distance of Ancient God Sanctuary is quite far from our Human 10 Cultivation Sanctuaries. Although Sanctuary Alliance has a wormhole that connects to the surrounding of Ancient God Sanctuary, the connection point of the wormhole is located in Sorrowful Region. If you were to depart from Thunderbolt Island, it would take at least 100 years to get to Sorrowful Region. Plus, for the 100 years you would only be passing by some dark void. Oh! Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes as he understood the meaning behind what Hall Master Yuan had said. He knew that his identity as an inverse cultivator had been exposed and there were many people who were keeping watch of him. Not only the enemies of Lineage of Star, but also some dark forces. The dark forces would seize any chance to take action against him. Jian Wushuang, how about this? Stay for a little longer on Thunderbolt Island. Not for very long, a dozen years at most. Then, I will send a message to you and you can depart right after that, Hall Master Yuan said. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded. Then, he started waiting on Thunderbolt Island. Of course, when he waited, he wouldn't stay idle, but he went to look for some opportunities for comprehension on Thunderbolt Island. It was a pity that he couldn't increase his power even though he found opportunities. In the blink of an eye, 13 years flew past. Jian Wushuang, you can depart to Sorrowful Region now. Remember, do not take a wormhole when you leave, Hall Master Yuan exhorted. All right, Jian Wushuang smiled. Although he was confused, he didn't ask. Jian Wushuang trusted Hall Master Yuan very much. Jian Wushuang departed from Thunderbolt Island that day, and he didn't take a wormhole when he left but relied on going on foot. Jian Wushuang had just left, and the people who had been watching him immediately received the news. Thunderbolt Island, at the peak of a lofty mountain. A grim-faced man in a black robe, Monster King, stood there. There was a chilly gleam in his eyes as a token appeared in his hand. Jian Wushuang has already left Thunderbolt Island. The message was spread at the fastest speed possible. In the starry night in a black hole, there was a dark palace floating in the middle of a dark land. A man in a black robe flashed and appeared in the hall. He shouted at the same time, Jian Wushuang on the first priority must kill list already left Thunderbolt Island. He is moving towards the direction of Sorrowful Region. Sorrowful Region? What is Jian Wushuang going to do there? A hoarse voice reverberated in the hall, but no one knew where the person was. He went to Sorrowful Region alone? Yes, and he didn't leave by taking the wormhole. The man in the black robe replied politely. He didn't take the wormhole? Did he intentionally bait us? The hoarse voice paused and then commanded. Inform the First Blood Shadow Troop to follow him immediately. Send Protector Yi together. Let him find out if there were experts of Sanctuary Alliance at the surroundings before launching an attack. If there is, immediately retreat. Amidst the sky of endless darkness, an airship from the outside world was moving at an amazing speed. Jian Wushuang was within the airship, closed off from the outside world. What he needed to do was to get into the wormhole at the Sorrowful Region. As for the other matters, he believed that Hall Master Yuan had made preparations for him already. Tens of years later, he passed by a region known as the Heaven Moon Milky Way. The region was the only way for him to get to the Sorrowful Region. However, at that very moment, there were a few blood-robed men gathered in the void somewhere in the heaven-moon Milky Way. Target locked on. We can strike at any moment. One of the blood-robed men said softly. There is no need to rush. A dark old man with almond-shaped eyes in the crowd shook his head. Give me some time. After that, the dark old man with almond-shaped eyes closed his eyes. The remaining blood-robed men waited quietly, and no one was suspicious of the dark old man in the slightest. After some time, the dark old man opened his eyes fiercely and his eyes were filled with coldness. Retreat immediately! As soon as the words left his mouth, the dark old man and the blood-robed men beside him changed into crimson light and flew in all directions. In the blink of an eye, all of them disappeared completely. Not long after those people left, swoosh, a black-armored, big man, who was carrying a thick, heavy, and huge saber had appeared at the void. Moreover, his icy-cold eyes were scanning the surroundings. Humph! This group of rascals is really fast at running. The big man gave a cold hum. After that, with a change of his body, he disappeared from his location. Jian Wushuang was clueless about what had transpired at that location. He merely continued to head toward the sorrowful region, and his trip was a smooth one with no hindrances. After 90 years, he arrived at the sorrowful region. With the aid of the wormhole within the sorrowful region, he set off toward the ancient god sanctuary. The ancient god sanctuary was one of the 4 sanctuaries that were occupied by special clans. Similarly, the ancient god sanctuary was a vast piece of land. However, it was still different from the human cultivator's 10 sanctuaries, as the ancient god sanctuary was not split into different lands. This is the ancient god sanctuary? Jian Wushuang set foot on the ground of the ancient god sanctuary. His eyes were observing the surroundings so that he could feel the environment around him. He could feel that the training environment in the ancient god sanctuary was not any different from the 10 cultivation sanctuaries. There are 2 people within the detecting range of my soul power as of the very moment. However, I am unable to feel the aura of the bloodline of the ancient god from them. Could it be that they are people from other clans? Jian Wushuang said surprisingly. In the ancient god sanctuary, even though the ancient gods are the masters, there are also many other special clans present. Among the special clans, some of them have formed tribes, while some of them have survived by affiliating themselves with the ancient gods. Comparing numbers, there are a lot more of the special clans compared to the ancient gods. The king of venomous worms' voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. Is that so? Jian Wushuang understood. In the ancient god sanctuary, some of the ancient gods will also survive in a tribe of their own. However, there are even more ancient gods that are gathered in the 9 great king cities. The 9 great king cities can be said to the 9 strongest powerhouses of the ancient god sanctuary. The king of venomous worms said. The 9 strongest powerhouses? In other words, the ancient god clan is not a completely unified clan. Jian Wushuang asked with astonishment. That's right, the king of venomous worms said. A long time ago, that is, an unknown number of years ago, during the most ancient period of time, there was an ancient god emperor within the ancient god clan, and he possessed the supreme bloodline of emperors, as well as extremely powerful abilities. That time, the ancient god clan had him as their leader, and it was indeed a complete clan. However, ever since the ancient god emperor disappeared or after he died, the ancient god clan divided and became the 9 great king cities. The 9 great king cities has always been ruled by the royal ancient god clan, which stood at the top of the ancient god clan. For example, my previous master king Luozhen was an 8-star royal ancient god, and he definitely stood at the top of the pyramid of the ancient god clan. As such, he occupied a great king city. Moreover, he also had a few 7-star ancient gods and many 6-star gods under him. However, after King Luozhen fell, his king city was naturally occupied by other royal ancient gods. King of venomous worms. The 7-star ancient god of the ancient god clan is already at the level of an almighty, right? Jian Wushuang questioned abruptly. Yes, he's an almighty. However, when compared to the human being sanctuary, he is just a normal almighty who is at a level similar to that of the owner of the Sky Sword Mountain. As for 8-star ancient gods, they are of the same level as the founder of the lineage of Star. The king of venomous worms said. In other words, A great king city of the ancient god sanctuary has a few normal almighties as well as an 8-star ancient god who is comparable to the Star Palace Master? Jian Wushuang questioned. That's right. The king of venomous worms nodded its head. Gosh, one king city is already like this. If it were 9 great king cities and the ancient god clan becomes unified and comes together, how powerful would they be? Jian Wushuang could not help but think about it. At the very least, they would be more powerful than a sanctuary of the human beings. The king of venomous worms said bluntly. That's highly possible. Jian Wushuang was speechless. Oh right, if the 8-star ancient gods within the ancient god clan is at the level of the Star Palace Master, then how about 9-star ancient gods? Is the ancient god emperor who unified the ancient god clan as one a 9-star ancient god? 9-star ancient gods. The king of venomous worms remained silent for some time. He then said, 9-star ancient gods are of the emperor level in human beings' terms. However, ancient gods of such a level are extremely rare. From what I know, in the history of the ancient god clan, only 2 9-star ancient gods have appeared before. One of them perished during a great battle. As for the remaining one, I am also not very sure if he is still in the ancient god clan. As for the ancient god emperor, it is said that he is a 10-star ancient god. 10-star. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes wide. 9-star ancient gods were equivalent to that of emperor-level human cultivators. As for emperors, they were the masters of the sanctuaries, as well as the greatest existences of the Sanctuary Alliance. Hence, 10 stars must definitely be above emperors. What kind of level was that? Of course, 10 stars are merely a legend and I myself have no idea whether it was really achieved. In the whole ancient god clan, there are probably very few people who know about this. After all, the ancient god emperor's generation was from an extremely long time ago. The king of venomous worms said. Jian Wushuang shrugged his shoulders. Jian Wushuang, you should first ask the 2 people who belong to a special clan to find out where we are now. The king of venomous worms said. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. After that, he headed in the direction of the 2 auras which were within the detecting range of his soul power. In the vast sky, 2 shadows were flying toward the front slowly. The 2 people had huge physiques and they were over 2 meters tall. Moreover, their skins were dark red in color and there was also a horn on their foreheads. As such, it was obvious that they were from the same clan. Swoosh! All of a sudden, Jian Wushuang appeared in front of the 2 of them. Eh? The 2 dark red-skinned, horned men became vigilant at once. No need to panic. I only wish to ask both of you for directions. Jian Wushuang laughed indifferently. Ask for directions? The 2 unicorn men with maroon skin exchanged a look and one of them immediately laughed. It's easy if you want to ask for directions. If you can defeat the 2 of us, my brother and I will tell you everything we know no matter what you ask. Oh! Jian Wushuang was shocked. He was only asking for directions, but he had to first defeat the 2 of them. Jian Wushuang, there are many special tribes in ancient Godland and most of the special tribes are extremely valiant. No matter what happens, they speak with their fists. The 2 of them are top universe gods too. They saw that they were on the same level as you are, so they wanted to fight a battle with you. King of Venomous Worms explained. I see. Jian Wushuang understood and he said with a smile. If so, please go first. My brother and I, you pick one. The unicorn man who was the elder brother said. There's no need for trouble. The 2 of you can fight against me at the same time. Jian Wushuang smiled. So arrogant. Brother, as he has already said so, let us team up and teach him a lesson then. All right. The 2 unicorn men with maroon skin reached a mutual agreement and immediately moved together. Just as they moved, Hong! Hong! The earth instantly shattered. The 2 of them were originally 2 meters tall, but that instant, they increased their height to a dozen meters tall. Just like 2 mountains, they pounded at Jian Wushuang straight away. Interesting. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and moved. He appeared before a small mountain and punched casually with one first. The older unicorn man was burning with rage and he clenched his fist and pounded fiercely. Bang! The size of 2 fists that weren't proportionate collided. After he let out a groan, the unicorn man with a mountain-like body suddenly rolled out. Jian Wushuang moved again but appeared above the head of another unicorn man. He pointed with his index finger and pressed on his head. Lie down. Hong. The ground under the unicorn man suddenly sunk and his body was pressed down by Jian Wushuang entirely. He couldn't move an inch. After a short duration, the battle ended. The two of you, do you admit defeat? Jian Wushuang looked at the two people before him. The two people resumed their original look of 2 meters tall. The two of them looked at Jian Wushuang in astonishment. Your strength is that strong? The older unicorn man exclaimed. My brother and I are members of Fire Demon Tribe. We, Fire Demon Tribe, are good at strength and we are at the same level as you are. But when we met force with force, we were cornered by you. In Ancient God Sanctuary, to be able to win against Fire Demon Tribe of the same realm, should only be Ancient God and those Ancient God with extremely pure bloodline. I am really an Ancient God, Jian Wushuang admitted. So can you answer my questions now? Of course, mister. Go ahead and ask whatever questions you want, the older unicorn man said. In Ancient God Sanctuary, many tribes spoke with power. Jian Wushuang's power was much stronger than theirs. They naturally admitted their defeat. I'd like to know where in the region of Ancient God Sanctuary is this, and where is the nearest city? Jian Wushuang asked. In a short while, Jian Wushuang got the answer that he wanted. The two Fire Demon tribesmen left right after as well. Jian Wushuang, let's go to the nearest city, Gu King City, King of Venomous Worms said. Jian Wushuang nodded and immediately went in the direction that the two Fire Demon tribe had given to go to the nearest Gu King City. Gu King City, one of the 9 ancient god cities, and most of the ancient gods in the city shared the surname Gu. Among the ancient god tribe, their surname was the symbol of their identity. There were many surnames among ancient gods, but there weren't many royal surnames that existed among the royal ancient gods. The surname Gu was one of the surnames of royal ancient gods. Gu King City was huge and crowded with experts. There were many experts from those special tribes, but there were a lot more of ancient gods. In Gu King City, there were more than 10 million ancient gods that resided there. The ancient gods with the surname Gu took up at least 50%. Jian Wushuang came to Gu King City. On the streets of Gu King City, Jian Wushuang could see many people shuttling to and fro. Some of the figures had a normal human appearance, some were ancient god bodies a few meters tall, and there were also various other tribes. By the side of the streets, he saw lofty buildings. The buildings were huge. The ancient gods were tall and brawny after all. Jian Wushuang, as you came to ancient god tribe, give yourself an ancient god name. Otherwise, your name as Jian Wushuang will be strange, and you might attract attention inevitably. King of Venomous Worms reminded. Jian Wushuang nodded. He thought and he had an idea. The ancient gods in Gu King City mostly have the surname Gu. So, I shall use Gu as my surname. I'll just name myself Gu Jian. Simple. As long as it sounds like an ancient god's name, it will do. King of Venomous Worms didn't care. Oh yeah, I remember back when I met ancient god tribes back in Firmament Territory in Greenfire World. Most of them has the surname Gu as well. Their leader, King Gu Tong, was a 7-star royal ancient god. I wonder if they are related to Gu King City, Jian Wushuang muttered. As they are ancient gods with the surname Gu, they are definitely related to Gu King City, King of Venomous Worms said. If so, that'd be interesting. I wonder if I will run into those ancient gods in Gu King City that I met back then in Firmament Territory. Jian Wushuang was looking forward to it. Don't bother with that just yet. First, go and register for training examination of Ancient God Palace that happens every century. King of Venomous Worms said. Training examination of Ancient God Palace? What's that? Jian Wushuang was confused. Ancient God Palace is a place specifically for cultivating ancient god secret skills and massacre unique skills. There's 9 great king cities and every city has an ancient god palace and they teach 5-star and 6-star ancient god's secret skill and unique skill in Ancient God Palace. The lowest requirement to enter Ancient God Palace is 5-star Ancient God that passed 3 Ancient Gods test. You happen to fulfill the criteria, King of Venomous Worms said. In other words, If I want to cultivate ancient god secret skills and unique skills that are suitable for my current level, I have to enter ancient god palace? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes. Besides ancient god palace, there is almost no hope to get any secret skill for a 5-star ancient god or above within ancient god sanctuary. Just like some ancient god tribe in ancient god sanctuary, they have some secret skills and unique skills for ancient gods internally, but the levels are too low. Understood. Jian Wushuang understood, and he walked into the ancient god palace of Gu King City. In the ancient god palace, at the place of registration for the examination. Your name? An old married woman sitting behind a desk said. Gu Jian, Jian Wushuang said. Which king do you wish to be under? The old married woman continued to question him. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, and he complained in his mind. King of venomous worms, you did not tell me that such a question would be asked during registration. I have not been to the ancient god sanctuary for so many years. How could I know the ancient god palace would change its rules? The king of venomous worms curled his lips and said. Jian Wushuang shrugged his shoulders and took a deep breath. King Gutong. Jian Wushuang was unable to confirm whether King Gutong was a royal ancient god of the Gu King City. However, since he did not know of any other kings, he could only summon up his courage and try his luck. King Gutong? The old married woman raised her head and glanced at Jian Wushuang with surprise. However, she still wrote down the name Gu Jian on a jade bamboo strip. Take this jade bamboo strip and come back 30 years later to participate in the assessment. Thank you very much. Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief. After taking the jade bamboo strip, he left immediately. Looks like King Gutong is indeed a 7-star ancient god of the Gu King City. Jian Wushuang giggled. Perhaps so. The king of venomous worms said. Oh right. King of venomous worms, you said that the secret skills and close-quarter combat unique skills that are suitable for an ancient god like me to learn are within the ancient god palace. However, what kind of secret skills and unique skills are there? Jian Wushuang questioned with curiosity. He had only come for the sake of the secret skills and unique skills. As such, he needed to have a basic understanding of the secret skills and unique skills. In the ancient god clan, the 3 secret skills and the 4 unique skills are best suited for 5-star, 6-star, and even 7-star ancient gods. The 3 secret skills are the thunder attracting skill, star destruction skill, and the moon picking skill. The 3 secret skills are known as remarkable abilities that can shake the whole universe. Back then, as an 8-star ancient god, my old master King Luozhen had mastered these 3 secret skills completely. Moreover, these 3 secret skills were one of the greatest powers that he relied on. As for the 4 unique skills, they are skills used specially for close-quarters combat. They are similar to those unique skills created by human beings by comprehending the power of Heaven Wei. However, the ancient gods are strong in terms of their bodies and the strength that they possess. As for the power of Heaven Wei, they have never really studied it. Hence, within the ancient god clan, there are very few people who are able to comprehend the power of Heaven Wei. Even if they were able to comprehend it, they would only be able to comprehend a general portion of it. However, even without the aid of the power of Heaven Wei, with just the unreasonable power of bloodline within their own bodies and these 4 unique skills, the clansmen of the ancient gods would not be weaker than a human being of similar realm. Moreover, they might even be slightly stronger. The king of venomous worms said. After hearing what was said, Jian Wushuang exclaimed in admiration. The ancient god clan possessed powerful bodies, which were their greatest advantage. However, their comprehension of the power of Heaven Wei was incomparable to human beings. In spite of that, even without comprehending the power of Heaven Wei at all, the ancient gods could also possess unparalleled abilities. Not only that, they could also achieve a level that could be compared to the human beings almighties and even emperor-level super experts. The finger-type ancient god unique skill that I grasped as a result of obtaining the memory of inheritance previously, is it considered one of the 4 unique skills? Jian Wushuang asked. That's right. The finger skill that you grasped is the ancient god's finger of the ancient god clan's 4 unique skills. However, what you have obtained is merely the first 6 fingers of the ancient god's finger. Under normal circumstances, a 6-star ancient god would be able to use these 6 fingers. However, there are still 3 final fingers remaining for this finger skill, and they can only be used by 7-star ancient gods. The king of venomous worms said, "As expected, there are 3 stronger fingers." Jian Wushuang's eyes brightened up. Among the unique skills of the ancient god clan, he had quite a good understanding of the ancient god's finger. Moreover, the ancient god's finger was indeed powerful, and it even became Jian Wushuang's strongest attack move at one point in time. However, within the ancient god clan, there were still 3 other unique skills and the 3 secret skills which could be compared to the ancient god's finger. As he thought about it, Jian Wushuang started to feel excited. I have to pass that assessment 30 years later and enter the ancient god palace. Jian Wushuang clenched both his fists tightly. For the 30 years, Jian Wushuang had stayed within the Gu King city and trained quietly. To Jian Wushuang of that very moment, 30 years' time was just a split second and it would be over quickly. In the ancient god palace, there were hundreds of figures standing on the drill ground. There were males and females among the figures. However, their physiques were big in general. Jian Wushuang was within the crowd as well. Compared to others, his body was obviously a lot smaller. Isn't there a lot of people? Jian Wushuang was looking at the surrounding people. All those people were ancient gods. Moreover, they were 5-star ancient gods who had cleared the ancient god test of the 3rd heaven. Hence, in terms of realm, they were the same as Jian Wushuang. Swoosh! An indifferent man, who was above 5 meters tall and glowing with silver light, appeared in front of everyone. The indifferent man was a 6-star, silver-armored ancient god, and he was equivalent to a real god of human beings. Moreover, he was an eternal real god. The assessment this time around will consist of 3 stages. Those who are able to pass all 3 stages will be able to stay in the ancient god palace. As for failures, you can come back again after 10,000 years. The indifferent man's voice spread across the crowd. All the ancient gods on the martial arts training ground could not help but clench their fists. The ancient god assessment. Although it would be held once every 100 years, if the participating ancient gods failed the assessment this time around, they would have to wait for another 10,000 years before being able to participate in the assessment a second time. That was the ancient god palace's rules. Jian Wushuang, let me remind you that this is the ancient god clan and you are participating in the ancient god assessment. Hence, during the assessment later, you had better not use your divine power as well as the comprehension of the power of Heaven Wei. You have to use only ancient god power and techniques of ancient gods to pass this assessment. The king of venomous worms said. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Now let the first assessment begin. The indifferent man's voice spread throughout the area. The expressions of all the ancient gods on the martial arts training ground became serious and they were also extremely nervous. However, the indifferent man only announced the start of the first assessment, not its content. At the moment when all the ancient gods were feeling puzzled. Rumble, a frightening power exerted pressure on everyone. The power contained pressure from an extremely pure bloodline, as well as aura, and it was placed on top of everyone like a lofty mountain. The real gods on the martial arts training ground were under great pressure from the weight and some of them were caught by surprise. Hence, 4 of them crouched down straight away. By crouching down, they had failed the assessment. What powerful pressure! This pressure should be released by top 6-star ancient gods which are equivalent to chaotic real gods of the human beings. Moreover, the bloodline of this ancient god is extremely pure, and he should be a gold-armored ancient god, Jian Wushuang said. As the people present were only 5-star ancient gods, they naturally had difficulty resisting the pressure released by a top 6-star gold-armored ancient god with his full power. In the martial arts battlefield, many ancient gods were overwhelmed by the great pressure, but they didn't give up. Jian Wushuang also appeared to be struggling, but he was actually faking it. With his strength and mind power, Jian Wushuang could easily handle it even if a 6-star silver-armored ancient god released the pressure solely toward him. To him it was like a piece of cake. Bang! Many competitors fell down. Just a moment later, half of the ancient gods failed the game and quit. The rest of the participants, except Jian Wushuang, were all struggling with great difficulty. At that moment, the great pressure dissipated all of a sudden. All of the competitors felt relieved. They were so tired that they laid down and panted heavily. Jian Wushuang was still standing and appeared red in the face. There was only one person still standing in addition to Jian Wushuang. He was 2 meters tall and had eyes filled with golden light. The man was looking at Jian Wushuang curiously. He is the only one who is standing as I do. He seems highly strong, the young man muttered. The first round of the game has ended. Competitors who have passed can have a rest for half an hour, and the second round will begin. A powerful god was presiding over the game. The people who passed the first round of tests on the battlefield immediately took time to recover. After half an hour, the ancient gods had almost restored their power to their peaks. At that time, the 8 ancient gods carried a huge drum and slowly walked towards the battlefield. The drums. Jian Wushuang was puzzled. This is Myriad Beast's drum, the unique drum of the ancient gods. King of Venomous Worms said. Except Jian Wushuang, other competitors apparently had a clear idea of what the drum was. I don't think I should say anything more about the second round, given that you are all familiar with Myriad Beast's drum. Every candidate goes to beat the drum one by one, and he beats as many times as possible, the god presiding over the game said. The first ancient god came forward. Bang! 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 The ancient god beat 3 times in the beginning, and the sound was thunderous. Then he apparently slowed down but kept going. After 12 times, the ancient god tried to knock again, but this time, when the drumsticks knocked on the drums, there was no sound. It is not a good performance, King of Venomous Worms commented. Oh! Jian Wushuang wondered how much he could achieve. He didn't think that the drum was easy to beat. After that, one ancient god after another came forward and knocked on the drum, but most of them beat only 13 to 18 times. The best candidate was the 2-meter-tall young man, who beat 21 times. The first ancient god to beat over 20 times. After the young man beat 20 times, the host could not help but nod at him slightly to show his appreciation. Finally, it was Jian Wushuang's turn. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang came in front of the drum. Jian Wushuang, the Beast King drum, is not uncommon in the ancient god sanctuary. Not only the Gu King city but also some of the ancient god tribes have the existence of their Beast King drums, so these participants must have beat the drum many times. They know how to control the power properly, but you are different. It is the first time for you to beat the drum. So spare no efforts to beat the drum by using your ancient god power. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded. After taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang took the drumsticks and started to generate his ancient god power. Boom! The first time Jian Wushuang beat the Beast King drum, he realized that he couldn't act as coherently as the other ancient gods. After only one stroke, he had to pause for a while, but the drum put out a heavy sound. He felt a great resistance force when he was beating. It seems that I have to counter the great force in order to beat the drum. Hey! 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 After 4 consecutive beats, Jian Wushuang felt that the resistance was getting stronger and stronger. Just do your best. Jian Wushuang then generated his ancient god power to the limit, followed by several sounds of the drum beating. The drum was resounding in this martial arts field. After a while, Jian Wushuang had beat for 20 times. The resistance of the drum had reached an extremely high level, and Jian Wushuang had to admit that he couldn't use his power properly. In fact, I once beat the Beast King drum when I didn't have that much ancient god power, and I know that I don't need to use so much ancient god power. At least 50% of my power is wasted. Jian Wushuang shook his head smilingly, but he didn't care that much actually. Anyway, he continued to use the rest of his power to beat the drum. Hey! 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 Another 4 beats. When the 5th beat was made, Jian Wushuang was completely exhausted. The drumsticks tapped on the drum, but there was no sound. Jian Wushuang's final result was 24. Jian Wushuang, with the high purity of your blood lineage and the ancient god power you have, if you knew how to use your power properly and didn't waste so much power, you could have completely finished beating even 30 times. King of Venomous Worms said. Haha, indeed, but it doesn't matter, as long as I can pass this game. Jian Wushuang smiled. Many ancient gods participating in the game. including the youth with golden eyes who had beaten the drum 21 times. All widened their eyes and looked at the sword with amazement. 24 sounds? This person actually sounded the Beast King drum 24 times? His ancient god power is so thick and rich. Moreover, his bloodline is definitely extremely pure. The ancient gods around the area were exclaiming with admiration. It should be known that the golden-haired youth, who was the strongest among them, had only managed to sound the drum 21 times. In addition, it would get even harder to sound the Beast King drum the more times it was sounded. Where did this person come from? Why have I not heard of him before? The golden-haired youth frowned. Even the indifferent man who was hosting the assessment glanced at Jian Wushuang and smiled at him. Not bad. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. In a split second, the second assessment was over. Anyone who had managed to sound the Beast King drum at least 16 times would be able to enter the third assessment. With that, the ancient gods in the assessment were reduced by more than half. In the end, only 10 ancient gods remained for the third assessment. Amidst these 10 ancient gods, the most dazzling person was naturally Jian Wushuang, followed by the golden-haired youth. We shall rest for 2 days so that all of you can recover your ancient god power. The third assessment shall begin 2 days later, the indifferent man said. The 10 remaining ancient gods then started to recover their ancient god power immediately. After all, they had exhausted all their ancient god power to sound the Beast King drum moments ago. Under normal circumstances, the ancient gods would definitely be unable to recover their ancient god power fully in 2 days' time. However, the ancient gods present were top 5-star ancient gods who had cleared the ancient god test of the third heaven. Hence, they had been recognized by the plenilune. By relying on the plenilune inside their bodies to recover their power, they would definitely be able to achieve their peak within 2 days, or even less than 2 days. At the same time when they were recovering their ancient god power, the golden-haired youth came beside Jian Wushuang. I am Gu Zhen and I am under King Gu Yi. The golden-haired youth introduced himself. Gu Jian and I am under King Gu Tong, Jian Wushuang said. King Gu Tong? The golden-haired youth revealed a surprised expression. You are a clansman of King Gu Tong? That's right. Is there a problem? Jian Wushuang said. No problem. It's just that I did not expect that among the clansmen of King Gu Tong. There would actually still be an outstanding clansman like you. Gu Zhen gasped with admiration. After hearing what was said, Jian Wushuang's expression changed. He could tell that the clansmen of King Gu Tong, who he had mentioned, seemed to be in a bad situation. It's really impressive that you are able to sound the Beast King drum 24 times. Among the 5-star ancient gods in the whole Gu King city, there are probably very few people who can compete with you. However, sounding the Beast King drum merely requires the richness and thickness of the ancient god power as well as the purity of the bloodline. It is not really affected by our own fighting capabilities. Gu Zhen stared at Jian Wushuang. If nothing goes wrong, the third assessment later on should be actual combat. If there is an opportunity then, let's have a fair competition. Gu Zhen's eyes were filled with excitement, and there was a fighting intent hidden deep inside his eyes. It was obvious that he did not feel that he was not as outstanding as Jian Wushuang. All right. Jian Wushuang nodded his head while laughing. 2 days' time passed by in a flash. Everyone had made a full recovery and they were at their peaks. The eyes of the indifferent man who was hosting the assessment looked around the surrounding and his voice was extremely loud. The third assessment is actual combat and your opponent is over there. Under the guidance of the indifferent man, the participants saw a few ancient gods carrying a giant iron cage together, and they were walking toward the martial arts training ground. Upon arriving at the martial arts training ground, the ancient gods removed the black cloth on the cage and revealed the 3 humongous animals within the cage. For the 3 humongous animals, each of them was at least 100 feet tall. Moreover, their entire bodies were filled with pitch-black hair and they looked like giant apes. However, they had a total of 4 arms and every arm was unusually thick. These are undying demon apes. The king of venomous worms' voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's head. I did not expect the ancient god palace of the Gu King city to actually use undying demon apes as your opponents for the assessment. This is going to be interesting. The indifferent man at the center of the martial arts training ground continued to speak. All of you will take turns to fight against these 3 undying demon apes. You have 10 breaths time. As long as you are able to defeat these 3 undying demon apes within this time limit, you will pass this assessment. Now, the first one ancient god walked up immediately, and in no time, he started to fight against the 3 undying demon apes. As soon as they fought, Jian Wushuang could tell that although the 3 undying demon apes had extremely big physiques, their abilities were not strong and they were similar to top universe gods. However, when the 3 undying demon apes unleashed their powers, they would at most be slightly stronger than a top universe god of the 3rd heaven of the human beings. Moreover, the 3 undying demon apes had never touched the power of Heaven Wei before. Hence, their close-quarters combat techniques were sloppy. The undying demon ape is a weak clan, right? Compared to other special clans, it seems to be a lot weaker, Jian Wushuang murmured. Jian Wushuang, you're wrong. The undying demon ape is not a weak clan. On the contrary, it is a top clan. Within the ancient god sanctuary, apart from the ancient god clan, there are the 8 top clans which are considered the strongest. As for the 8 top clans, the undying demon ape clan is one of them. The king of venomous worms said. Top clan? Even though they are clearly not strong, Jian Wushuang said with surprise. Indeed, they are not strong. However, they possess special abilities. Just wait and see. The king of venomous worms laughed. Jian Wushuang observed thoroughly. At that very moment, the ancient god in the battlefield struck the head of an undying demon ape with a very big fist of his fiercely, and his unreasonable strength smashed the head of the undying demon ape straight away. Under normal circumstances, when the head was smashed, the being would be completely dead. However, after some time, the head of the undying demon ape regenerated. This is... Jian Wushuang opened his eyes wide. The undying demon ape. Could it be that they have the ability to not die? Not die? That's not true. Jian Wushuang, as an inverse cultivator, back then when you were at the stage of eternal realm, wasn't the ability that you possessed immortality as well? Although the special ability of the undying demon ape is slightly inferior to your immortality, it is still very close to it. Thus, if you want to kill an undying demon ape, unless you use a great technique to annihilate its body completely, otherwise it will regenerate quickly. The king of venomous worms said. I see! Jian Wushuang exclaimed with admiration. He finally knew why the undying demon apes were known as one of the top clans. Their undying ability was really a bit too frightening. With such an ability, the 3 undying demon apes which were top universe gods would be fine as long as they did not come across experts that were at the level of top void real gods and above. However, if a normal void real god were to come across the undying demon apes, it would be very difficult for the void real god to kill them. Since the undying demon ape's ability to remain alive was so strong, they would continue to multiply and their numbers would naturally increase. As they continued to grow, they would be able to become a top clan. 10 breaths time is up, the indifferent man who was hosting the assessment shouted. With that, the battle stopped straight away and the ancient god who fought first walked down with his face filled with bitterness. Next one. The 3rd round of tests continued, and each ancient god went up one by one to fight the 3 undying demon apes. Although undying demon apes were not so strong, they still posed a great challenge for the ancient gods as participants could beat them within 10 breaths. Soon more than a dozen ancient gods had taken the challenge, but only one person had passed the test. At that time, the youth with golden eyes appeared. Gu Jian, let's have a competition and see who can beat those apes in the shortest time. Gu Jian also said to Jian Wushuang before he took the challenge. Okay. Jian Wushuang responded with a smile. Gu Jian was obviously stronger than other ancient gods who had participated in the test, not only in terms of purity of his blood but also in his fighting skills. In just 6 breaths, the 3 undying demon apes were defeated by Gu Jian. 6 breaths. Gu Jian was obviously quite satisfied with his performance. It is your turn, Gu Jian. Gu Jian walked down and looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang smiled and went up. The 3 undying demon apes' eyes were full of aggression and endless hate when they stared at the sword. They were imprisoned by those from the ancient god clan and had suffered humiliation. They were therefore resentful to ancient gods from ancient god clan. Therefore, every time they fought against the ancient gods, They all tried their best to kill their enemies, but always failed. Jian Wushuang, you can use your ancient god power to defeat them, King of Venomous Worms suggested. Yeah, Jian Wushuang agreed. Get started, the host announced. In the blink of an eye, 3 undying demon apes rushed straight toward Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang calmly generated his great ancient god power into his right index finger. Ancient god's 4th finger. God test. He pointed his powerful index finger to the apes. Bang! The surrounding space was smashed and the whole universe went dark. In the darkness, a giant finger came into existence from the distant sky. Everyone was shocked. Is it ancient god 4th finger? Even the prominent judge was surprised and frowned. Generally, cultivators could only learn the unique skill of ancient god finger in ancient god palace in 9 great king cities. Though several ancient god tribes also had this unique skill, they had no more than the first 3 finger skills. However, Jian Wushuang used the 4th one. Has he learned the skill from the ancient god palace? The host wondered. The giant finger that had the power to ruin the earth stretched out, and Jian Wushuang used the finger to attack undying demon apes, who couldn't resist at all. In an instant, 3 undying demon apes were torn apart by the terrifying power. The power of this finger finally fell completely. The battlefield calmed down, and the undying demon apes began to recover. Okay, just with my ancient god power, I can't kill these 3 undying demon apes, Jian Wushuang said. But he didn't care. He had successfully finished what the game had required. As for the time spent, only a breath. Yes, Jian Wushuang had defeated the 3 undying demon apes only with a 1 breath's time. Guzhen felt mixed feelings when he saw Jian Wushuang's performance. I thought that I was good to beat the undying demon apes with 6 breaths, but this guy used only 1 breath, and he is even able to use the ancient god 4th finger. How is it possible? How did he get this skill? Guzhen was confused. Soon, the 3rd round of tests was completely over. Among the hundreds of ancient gods participating in the test from the beginning, only 4 people had passed all the 3 rounds. Jian Wushuang was among them. That is to say, I can go to the ancient god palace to cultivate the 3 secret skills and 4 unique skills there, right? Jian Wushuang was excited. It is supposed to be like that. But the voice of King of Venomous Worms suddenly changed. What's wrong? Jian Wushuang frowned, but the next moment he immediately felt a strong power. Other ancient gods in this martial arts field had also noticed the coming figure. He was a bald man in a long robe. The bald man showed his ancient god body. He was 5 meters tall, and his body was covered with a layer of dark golden light. The most eye-catching characteristic was the bald man's eyebrows, between which there were 7 stars. 7-star ancient god. Many of the ancient gods were shocked, and they gathered to bow to the 7-star ancient god. He overlooked the ancient gods in front of him and found the youth with golden eyes and spoke. Guzhen, my dear king. Guzhen immediately came forward to show his respect. The bald man was King Gui. Have you passed the test? King Gui asked Guzhen. Yes. Guzhen nodded. You are the best? King Gui asked. Guzhen immediately shook his head. I am not the best. The best is Gu Jin. Then Guzhen pointed to Jian Wushuang. Then King Kui glanced at Jian Wushuang. But the moment he looked at Jian Wushuang he was surprised. And in front of a 7-star ancient god, who was comparable to the mighty, Jian Wushuang was a little bit nervous. Jian Wushuang, I think you are in trouble now, King of Venomous Worms said to Jian Wushuang. Little guy, show your ancient god body, King Gui said to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was surprised by the requirement. So were others. Others realized that they didn't see Jian Wushuang's ancient god body when he was beating the drum or fighting the apes. Do as he said, Jian Wushuang. It's now hard to hide your power, King of Venomous Worms said. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly and his figure also exploded in the next moment while his skin turned dark. He started to show his power. This is Royal Ancient God. Many ancient gods were shocked when they felt the power of Jian Wushuang. Even King Gui was surprised. This breath is the human god bloodline.